for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
I need your help to get to the year 1985.
You're listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
All right. Yay. How you doing? How you doing? Fade to Black. Bespoke radio for the masses. Yeah, man. How you doing? I'm in a great mood. It's going to be one of those nights tonight. It's Wednesday, October 24th, 2018. 300 days into the new year, just 65 days left. Unbelievable. How did we get here? As always, tonight we are live from a bunker somewhere in the middle of beautiful downtown Burbank, California. And I would like to welcome everybody listening all around the world, all across the United States, hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth, up and down, east and west, north and south, far and near. This is Fade to Black. For KJCR, the Game Changer Network, and KGRA, the Planet, I am your host, Jimmy Church. What is cracking, everybody? How you doing? How you doing? I'm looking at these phone lines. You know, they just filled up. I don't even know if I'm taking calls tonight. So if you can hear me right now, don't even bother. Stop. I'm not going to go and hang up on everybody. Just stop. Oh, man, that was just a nutty flood. Okay. All right. I just mentioned tonight Nick Redfern is here. We're going to talk about his new book on abductions called Top Secret Alien Abduction Files. There it is, holding it up. What the government doesn't want you to know. I'm holding it up for the camera. Look at that. It's a great book, too. I was talking to Nick before the show. He writes a lot of books, you know, and it's his gig. He's a great author, but this one is a great one, and I recommend it to everybody. The links are over at jimmychurchradio.com. And, of course, you can go to Amazon, too, as well, and everything is right there. Top Secret Alien Abduction Files, What the Government Doesn't Want You to Know. What's great about the book, we'll be talking to Nick about this tonight. There are quite a few, and you would think that I know about every abduction case ever in the history of everything. And obviously, after reading this book, I was wrong. So there's that part, and there's some really great insight in the book that I didn't. I'm going to be straight. I didn't expect from Nick. It's really, really, really well done. In that, you know, when I think of Nick, I think of, you know, crypto stuff and Men in Black. Black-eyed children, you know, just things, but this is a bit different. You know, I think of Bigfoot and cryptozoology and stuff like that. And nobody says chupacabra better than Nick Redfern, right? Well, the book is good, so we'll be discussing this all night. And tomorrow night, Fader night, open lines all night long. Okay, so there you go. It's been a busy week here. Lots of stuff going down, and I know that the phone lines are going to be crazy tomorrow night. So there you go. And Where did we go from? It was such a crazy news day. I'm going to get to all of that in just a second. And there's a bunch of stuff that you may not know about that I'm going to discuss here in just a minute. And we will pick up everything tomorrow night on Fade to Black, too, as well. For Fader Night, of course, there is On Stellar, and that is the social media platform where I hang out, onstellar.com. Of course, Twitter, you can follow me there, at JChurchRadio. Facebook is whatever, but, you know, I still kind of hang out there once in a while. And YouTube. And you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, and the links are over at jimmychurchradio.com. And what we basically do on YouTube, well, we broadcast there live, and we take the bunker cam and take it over to there and bring the bunker cam back from YouTube and all of that. So we do that. And then, of course, we, post our archives there for the show. And what YouTube started out with for us, and, well, it's still the same thing today, hasn't changed. YouTube, so many years ago, even before Fade to Black, when we were doing sports, what we did with YouTube was just treat it as an archive, right? So there would be an archive of everything from the beginning, and it would always be there and stuff. And that's the way that we treat it. It's just an archive. No, it's unedited. It's easy. We pull the files over, upload, whatever, show title, done. And that's what YouTube is there for. But what YouTube has evolved into since then for the rest of the world is it's an entertainment platform now. And so there are people out there by the billions that get all of their sources for everything, their entertainment, their movies, their television, their news. They cruise YouTube all day long. That's what they do. It's a YouTube world. So that's kind of what has happened to Fade to Black, where I'm assuming, because I don't do it, but I'm assuming that people get their Fade to Black fix from YouTube. And it may be from live, or it may be, from the archives. But that's what it's turned into. So you can go and subscribe if that's what you do. If you're in a YouTube world, subscribe to our channel right there. And the links are at jimmychurchradio.com. If you're listening live right now, well, go subscribe to the channel. Okay? All right. At JChurchRadio is Twitter. Hashtag F2B. Very important. Hashtag F2B is the sandbox. Now, another note for those of you out there that are either new or wondering what I'm talking about when I say hashtag F2B, the sandbox. It has turned into what the sandbox has turned into, and what that hashtag has turned into that you have done, the audience has done over the years. Hashtag F2B. That is the source of information now. Everybody tweets to hashtag F2B. You've got breaking news. You want something to be seen. If you have, check this out. It's like this, and I'm not exaggerating. Let's say you follow 100 people on Twitter, and you've got 100 followers on Twitter, or you've got 200, or you've got 1,000, 5,000, right? Whatever it is, whatever that number is. But you want to be seen. Hashtag F2B. Whatever that tweet is. You got 25 followers, you've got 100, you want to get exposed to literally tens of thousands in seconds, hashtag F2B. That's what you do. If you think you're hot stuff, you've got your 5,000 followers, and you think you're about something, you're going to use hashtag F2B. That's what you're going to do. And you should. And you, the audience, have done that. And I thank you. Hashtag F2B is crazy huge. And I thank you for that. It wasn't always that way. And everything about the show, you know what? I don't do this often. I don't do it often enough. I got to thank you. I got to thank this audience. Right? Yeah, like this, Jimmy. Hashtag F2B. Exactly like that. And that's going to get a retweet. See? That'll get a retweet right there. Let's retweet that. Frankie Four Fingers. That was cool. That's somebody that's paying attention. But I don't thank you guys enough. Twitter, this show, the sandbox, the chat rooms, everything, YouTube, everything Fade to Black is because of you. I don't thank you enough. You know, and you built the sandbox, you built our Twitterverse. You did this. You did everything that's over on YouTube. You did the Spreaker, these numbers. You know, I haven't been to, and I'll admit this, I don't know how many subscribers we have on Twitter. I don't know how many subscribers there are on our Facebook page. I don't know. Or you call those likes. I don't know. I don't know how many people are on TuneIn. You know, Race over at KGRA, who runs, the most amazing network on all of the internet, right? The number one. I don't know how many people are listening. I don't ask. You know, I don't know. I don't know how many people do things over on iHeartRadio. I don't go and look up these numbers. I don't know what they are. I can tell you what my Twitter is. My Twitter is, let's click on home. Twitter, I have 26,000.2 followers. That's pretty crazy to me. That's pretty crazy. And we have done all of this. That's a pretty crazy number. 26,000. We've done all of this because of you, because we don't advertise. We don't have, some big corporate angel donor or selling stock. We don't do that. And it's all done because of you. All of it. Everything is word of mouth on this show. Completely organic. So I don't do it enough. So I just let me do it now. I'm feeling all warm and fuzzy. Thank you. Okay, to all of you. You can also email and say thank you to me at jimmychurchradio.com. How's that? All right, let's get to this crazy ass breaking news today. It just freaks me out. Today, 5 more bombs arrived in the mail to Barack Obama in Washington, D.C., Hillary Clinton in Chappaqua, New York, John Brennan and CNN in New York City, Maxine Waters in Capitol Heights, Maryland, and Eric Holder in Sunrise, Florida, via Wasserman Schultz's office. That bomb was a piece of mail that was returned to the return address, which was Wasserman's. That's a crazy news day. I don't like this. I don't like it at all. And well, there's no reason to like it, but I'm saying this kind of news day sucks. All of the envelopes listed Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz as the return address. I think that has been confirmed. I could be wrong, but that is the best that we can do with that. None of the explosives detonated, and nobody was hurt. The pipe bombs all arrived in envelopes and had typed letters on them for the names and addresses, and 6 stamps that bore no cancellation mark on it. So what would that indicate? It indicates that they were hand-delivered by somebody. To have, were the bombs made by one individual? Probably. I don't know. But to have Capitol Heights, Maryland, right? New York City, Chappaqua, New York, Washington, D.C., and to have them all arrive at the same time, well, then... And were they through the mail or not? Well, the stamps weren't stamped, right? So I don't know. This is a very strange thing to unwind. And then the bomb that was returned mail down into Florida at Wasserman Schultz's office would indicate that went through the mail system. Very trippy, and nothing exploded. So, I mean, was there... There was also reports on, this is going into today. We'll find out, more in, tomorrow and days and weeks ahead. But the bombs didn't go off. And if that was done through return mail down to Florida, what does that say? through all the handling and stuff. So I don't know. It's a very, 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 very strange situation. Now, I'm going to make one comment, and it's a loose one. Okay? It's just a loose comment, which is this. We're talking about pipe bombs here. Okay? And I went through, Unabomber comes to mind. We had all those bombs that were in Austin, Texas last year, too, as well. But or earlier this year, was it last year? Earlier this year? When you go through stuff like that, and you go through that kind of trauma and, that kind of terrorism, it's an uncomfortable feeling. And to see memes today and jokes being cracked about this, oh, man, I just think that's wrong. And it just shows you how divided this country is, where suddenly this is a funny thing, not like it's a joke. It's not a joke. Yeah, see, Dan Betts just tweeted, bombs are a joke. Are they? I don't even know what that means. And I don't find it funny. And there you go. Okay, so don't post a meme. Don't crack any funny stuff at this and send it to me. You do, you're blocked. All right, moving on. That was crazy. But also today, well, this was yesterday. The news is breaking today. The growing uncertainty about how San Francisco Superior Court Judge Suzanne Ramos Bolanos would rule in the Bayer appeal of the Monsanto cancer verdict was resolved yesterday morning as the judge upheld the jury's decision that the glyphosate-based weed killer Roundup sold by Monsanto caused a California man's terminal cancer and that Monsanto intentionally hid its dangers. Check this. The judge decided to reduce the punitive damage award from the original total of $289 million following the verdict that was reached earlier this summer down to $78.5 million. Now, Monsanto's liability could reach $800 billion. The original Bayer Monsanto buyout, and we all remember this, was $57 billion. Now the liability is $8. That sounds like a pretty bad investment. $800 billion. Clearly, Monsanto no longer looks like an asset to Bayer and its stockholders. That was a bad investment decision. Of course, the stock tanked today, and also Bayer's market cap shrunk today by $57 billion. I believe those are the numbers. I looked at the charts, and it is crazy. Unbelievable. I'm so happy. Don't forget, you can subscribe to our podcast for just $2 per month. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and click on the podcast banner. You can also become a Fadernaut over in our membership section on the site, and I would suggest that you do. I believe we're going to make the announcement tomorrow. We've got a little thing that I thought would be really cool for all of you coffee drinkers. So we'll make that announcement tomorrow if you become a game changer. Yeah, we're going to do something really cool for you guys. All right, so think about that. Don't forget, visit all of our sponsors by clicking on their banners at jimmychurchradio.com. Happy birthday to today, Kevin Kline. Kevin Kline is 71 years old. Great actor, no doubt. Very funny, one of the funniest. He was great in A Prairie Home Companion. Soap Dish, absolute classic. Soap Dish, to me, it is up there with Caddyshack, Blues Brothers, right? Soap Dish, it's right up there. French Kiss, it's a great movie. French Kiss, love story weaved into a hilarious comedy. I don't know if it's hilarious comedy that was disguised as a love story or the opposite. French Kiss is a great movie. How about A Fish Called Wanda? Right? But no. Kevin Kline is better known as the husband of Phoebe Cates. That's right. I said it. Nobody wants to say it out loud. I'll say it. I just did. Right there. On this day in history, 2003, the supersonic Concorde makes its last commercial passenger flight, traveling at twice the speed of sound from New York City's John F. Kennedy International Airport to London's Heathrow. And on that flight, I believe, Joan Collins. There's a bunch of celebrities. I don't know why I remember Joan Collins, but Joan Collins. Fate or fact? I love it. I love it when we get to this point in the show. Fate or fact? China owns all of the pandas in the world. And I think we knew that, right? But they rent them out for $1 million a year. And the lease agreement requires that any cubs born to be returned to China and does not include postage. And that is your fate or fact. Is this thing on? Is this thing working? Is that thing working? All right. Tonight, Nick Redfern is here. We're going to be talking about his new book, Top Secret Alien Abduction Files, What the Government Doesn't Want You to Know. There it is. That's the cover. The book is great. We're discussing that tonight. Tomorrow night's another Fader night. Open lines all night long. Now, here we go. This is where you need to just sit down and listen. Well, you know what? I pretty much say that every single night when I get to my rant. But listen to this. Especially, we've been talking about the secret space program, the SSP, all week on this show. I've been talking about it for years, but it's been the topic of conversation, right? Well, listen to me. This is where everybody out there, everybody needs to sit and listen. Because during the fourth public meeting of the National Space Council, Vice President and Chairman Mike Pence described the path forward needed to develop a sixth branch of the military known as the U.S. Space Force. Pence gave the opening remarks at the meeting yesterday, which was held at the National Defense University in Washington, D.C. Now, Pence emphasized at the meeting that space is a war-fighting domain. That's right. Now, I'm going to quote, open quote, right now from our Vice President Pence. He said, and I quote, "For decades, one independent study after another has called for reforms to the current organizational structure of our national space capabilities. This lack of a centralized leadership and accountability, we believe, poses a clear and present threat to our capacity to advance our national security in space." He continued, "I believe the time has come to stop studying the problem and start fixing it. The United States Space Force, we believe, is central to the solution that America needs." End quote. Pence described 6 recommendations the council planned to send to the president, Donald Trump. Right? Listen to this. Invited updates on the status of the council's previous projects and asked for testimony from 3 experts who supported the country's need for a space force. Here are the 6 recommendations for the council. Get your pen out, write this down. Number 1, create a new unified U.S. Space Command to establish a chain of command for Space Force operations and determine the doctrine, tactics, and procedures for space war fighting in the 21st century. Number 2, have the Secretary of Defense create a joint space development agency to cut through bureaucracy and make space technology quickly available when the Space Force needs it. Number 3, work with the National Security Council to conduct a comprehensive review of the current interagency authorities to make sure war fighters can react flexibly to stop threats in space. Number 4, direct the creation of a legislative proposal for the Space Force. Number 5, address the 2020 budget, which will allow for the Space Force's creation. And number 6, strengthen the relationship between the intelligence community and the Space Force. How do you like that? Now, I broke this down. I mean, I read through this, and I looked and deciphered and read between the lines of each one of these points. It's almost worth repeating, and especially when you look at number 1 or number 2, and then you get to 3, then you get to 4, then you get to 5 and 6, and you're like, holy crap. Number 1, create a new unified U.S. Space Command to establish a chain of command for Space Force operations and determine the doctrine, tactics, and procedures for space war. Yeah. Number 2, have the Secretary of Defense create a joint space development agency to cut through the bureaucracy and make space technology quickly available when the Space Force needs it. You've got to just ask yourself, what, right? Number 3, work with the National Security Council to conduct a comprehensive review of the current interagency authorities to make sure war fighters can react flexibly to stop threats to security in space. This is Vice President Mike Pence laying out the 6 points and recommendations for the president. Now, I got to tell you, and I'm reading, this is what went through my mind today. The president, whoever he may be, it happens to be this time around President Trump, whoever he is, opens up, just sits down, national security briefing. He's in the Oval Office. He opens up the folder, and he's looking at these 6 points. He obviously knows what it's about. And there's one side of it. There's one side of it that says, okay, we've got our forces on the ground. We've got GPS systems. We've got military communications. We've got all of the terrain imaging things that are going on up there. We've got all of the NSA satellites. We've got to protect those assets, right? Okay, all right. There's that part of it. And then there's the other part. War in space. That is very interesting. And that actually happened yesterday in the United States of America in Washington, D.C. You need to chew on that. Think about that. We'll talk about it tomorrow night on the show because it'll be open lines all night long. Tonight, it's Nick Redfern. And we are talking about his new book, Top Secret Alien Abduction Files, What the Government Doesn't Want You to Know. And that includes the Space Force. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Our guest tonight, Nick Redfern, on the Game Changer Network and KGRA The Planet. This is Fade to Black, and I'll be right back right after this short break. Stay with us.
This is Nicole Church, daughter of you-know-who, and you're listening to Fade to Black on JimmyChurchRadio.com and the Game Changer Network.
You're listening to Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
Fade to Black will now pause for alien identification.
The station that talks the net. KGRA Radio. When you take the beans from Central America with dashes of Indonesian and African mixed in and then roast it to the dark side of Fade to Black, you create the ultimate brew of fringe. Introducing the Fade to Black blend from River Moon Coffee. Yes, River Moon's darkest customized roast was created for the love of Fade to Black. The alchemy of masterful roasting and smoking the beans is in every sip of this full-bodied, dark Java. I need my coffee dark, deep, with distinct bittersweet chocolate highlights, just like the bunker. Leaning further into the darkness of the roast is Fade to Black blend from River Moon Coffee. Just click on the banner at jimmychurchradio.com and use the promo code F2BBLEND for 15% off of your order today. Go Beckley Teppy. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and you can get our podcast for just $2 per month. All you have to do is click on the podcast banner over at jimmychurchradio.com.
Times are changing. The circus of politics, healthcare's low standards and high prices, and let's not forget food quality. What to do? Arm yourself with Life Change Tea at getthetea.com. In a world of chemical imbalance and poor air and water quality, it's time you make a move. Log on to getthetea.com and stock up on organic non-GMO supplements. Don't forget the tea. Cleansing your body never felt so good. And we have a brand new tea called Takedown Tea, which helps support healthy glucose. All natural body support so you can be at your best, naturally. All you have to do is log on to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. We're not a fad that comes and goes. We are the real deal. Join us and armor up. Getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Changing America's health one tea bag at a time.
9 out of 10 geneticists agree.
Fade to Black is not your father's radio show on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the planet.
Do you want to lose weight but have no idea where to begin? The Fast Start Diet, a 3-day weight loss plan, is the answer. 3 days of nutritionally balanced, calorie-restricted meals delivered right to your door. No shopping, no measuring, and no cooking. Everything is prepared for you and ready to eat at home or on the go. The Fast Start Diet has all the amazing benefits of intermittent fasting without starving. We've helped thousands of people who have struggled to reach their weight loss goals. Isn't it time we helped you? With the Fast Start Diet, you'll lose weight and feel great.
Find Fast Start Diet on Amazon or go to faststartdiet.com and use promo code TALK to get 10% off your first box. And as a special bonus, Fast Start will include their #1 rated Lipo3 appetite suppressant spray free with your order. This is Jimmy Church. And whatever your diet plans are, do what I did. Go to faststartdiet.com.
Hi, this is Rob Reiner from Anvil, and you're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
What's up? I'm Chris. What up? This is Kyle Massey, and you're listening to Jimmy Church Radio.
All right, welcome back. Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. You can follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Join the conversation. There are going to be literally thousands of tweets tonight in the sandbox. Hashtag F2B. It's been nuts all day. It's heating up now, too, as well. Nick Redfern. Tonight is our guest. Tomorrow night will be open lines all night long. It is Fader night, so get ready for that. Lots to talk about. But tonight, we're going to be talking about Nick's new book, Top Secret Alien Abduction Files, what the government doesn't want you to know. I'm holding it up for the cameras right there. Nick works full-time as an author. He's a lecturer. He's a journalist. He writes about all that unsolved mystery stuff, including Bigfoot, UFOs, Loch Ness Monster, alien encounters, conspiracies. His books include For Nobody's Eyes Only, Monster Files, The World's Weirdest Places, The Pyramids and the Pentagon, Keep Out, The Real Men in Black, love that book, The NASA Conspiracies, Contactees, and Memoirs of a Monster Hunter. He writes for UFO Magazine and Mysterious Universe. He has appeared on numerous television shows, including Fox News, the History Channel's Ancient Aliens, Monster Quest, UFO Hunters, right? VH1's Legend Hunters, National Geographic Channel's The Truth about UFOs and Paranatural, and BBC's Out of This World, MSNBC's Countdown, and SyFy Channel's Proof Positive. And tonight we're going to talk about this new book, Alien Abduction Files. I'd like to welcome back to Fade to Black, the one and only Nick Redfern. Nick, how are you, man? Oh, I lost Nick right as I said okay, let me mute. Let me pull that. You know, Nick and I were talking before the show about his phone issues. And Nick, there you are. How are you, man?
Hey, Jimmy, I'm doing good, thanks.
We were just talking about phone issues, and look, bam, just like that.
Typical.
Yeah.
Blame it on the Men in Black.
Let's do that. Hey, Nick, welcome back to the show.
Thanks.
And the first question out of the gate, which just popped up on Twitter, Jimmy, you got to ask Nick what rock and roll shirt he's wearing right now. What?
Funnily enough, I'm wearing a Cramps T-shirt.
You got to love it, man. You got to love it.
I got literally hundreds of the things.
Yeah. This week, Fender, Fender guitars, right? Fender hooked me up with a really cool birthday present last week, 2 weeks ago. And but they also sent me a box full of Fender Stratocaster T-shirts. I mean, how cool is that? So
that is cool.
Yeah, so I've been sporting the Fender Strat shirts all week. Now, Nick, this is what I want to do first before we get to the book, which is I want to remind you. You may remember this. You do so many conferences, and I can respect that. But many years ago, you were on a panel with me, which you've done a few, but there was but there was one panel where you said something very interesting that I've never forgotten, Nick, and it was this. We were talking about how ET craft get to Earth, right? And you said, and we had so many people on the panel. I think you were sitting next to Stanton Friedman, and everybody had their own opinions. You went completely off the charts with your comment, which was, man, I think they're just already here. I think that there could be just a base on the moon or another planet, and they're not traveling across the galaxy. They're doing a drive-by, that they're here. And I never forgot that. Now, this is why I'm asking you to remember that statement. Because the Space Force has been created now, and they're going to throw this in the budget for 2020. And Mike Pence made this crazy statement yesterday about their 6 points of creation of the Space Force in preparation for space war. And I'm quoting him, right? It's a pretty crazy thing. But then it forced me to remember your statement that you made on that panel so many years ago. It's kind of feels a little strange to me. What do you think about this Space Force and your theory that, ET is right here in our solar system? Do you think there's something going on?
Well, I mean, I think primarily this, the so-called Space Force is probably sort of a modern-day version of what President Reagan had envisaged, the Star Wars program, which didn't really get off either. Now, I think, the technology is more advanced today, but in saying that, I mean, it's going to take a huge amount of budget, to sort of plan and put into place something like this, because if you think about it now, America doesn't even have a manned space program. I mean, we had one 30, 20 years ago. We'd imagine back then it would have been double, triple the size. But now, if we want to get into space, we have to hitch a ride on the Russians' rockets, to get to the International Space Station. We literally don't have a manned space program. So, for this sort of space war type organization, well, it's almost like going back to the beginning again. So, I'm not sure exactly how it's going to take off. And I'm guessing, that the primary goal is going to be to, find a way to zap, opposing missiles out of the sky. I don't personally think it's, it's driven by extraterrestrials. I think it's probably the fear that, somebody's going to launch an attack from the Earth's orbit rather than, from a silo or whatever, that kind of thing.
Do you think, and the obvious question would be, Nick, because you've written about this and covered this, whether it is the UFO phenomenon or the Men in Black or cattle mutilations, the phenomenon in general, that they know something that we don't, that they, and this is, like you just said, is probably somewhat already been in place, but now this is going public. Is there a need for concern here on our part?
Well, I think the primary concern would be, somebody like the Russians. I think that's probably who they're thinking about. I mean, if you look at the situation in the world today, with nuclear weapons and whatever, it's a very unstable world right now. And you even have people, making crazy statements to the effect that, you can win a nuclear war, which is crazy. No one can win a nuclear war.
Right.
Everybody loses, it's impossible to win it. And so, I think it's the concern of how things are just sort of, just getting, it's like the ball's almost rolling, you know what I mean? It's like we're arguing with the Russians every 5 minutes and the Chinese every 10 minutes. And, it's like, what's it going to take for people to sort of, or leaders around the world to sort of kind of pull back from the brink, But in saying that, that was pretty much what the situation was with Ronald Reagan when he was president. But he also had this, he would come out with these statements as to the effect that, how a potential alien threat would unite us all against, some sort of extraterrestrial enemy. So, who knows? Who knows if there's another agenda going on that the rest of us don't know about. Reagan kind of alluded to that when he was doing his plans to have Star Wars put into place. So who knows if, something else isn't going on that we don't know about, and there is like a second agenda, the first one being, terrestrial forces, and possibly, another one being extraterrestrial.
Yeah, you could hide everything, and that it's so obvious, right? You could hide everything into, well, it's the Russians, it's the Chinese, it's our GPS system, it's communications, it's military stuff, and we need to, defend that. Okay, well, all right, I see that. Hide the budget there, but then is there an extraterrestrial threat? Is there something else there? Why call it a space force if it's something else? Why not call it the Satellite Defense Initiative? Or whatever. But the Space Force and war in space certainly feels different to me.
Well, yeah, I think just the name itself has kind of got a lot of people thinking, what is this Space Force? It does kind of sound like, like the Marines going to space or something, you know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. And, I would be inclined to just say it was something to do, with the Russians or the Chinese or whatever. As I said, were it not for Reagan, when he was president, he wanted to create this sort of space-based armada, if you like. But he was also talking about extraterrestrials, in the same time frame, and how, we needed to keep a lookout for them. So what would intrigue me would be if, as the Space Force, gets more publicity, to keep a lookout to see if, anyone in the political arena then starts bringing up the UFO issue, kind of the way that Reagan brought the two together. It'll be interesting to see if anybody does that with the space war, that they, in a theoretical way, they bring the UFO angle into that as well. Then that would be, I think, that'd be kind of really eye-opening.
Yeah, I have night vision goggles. I don't know if you do, but I have night vision goggles, and looking up and seeing strange things is a very fun thing to do. Now, just take that to the next level, right? You're looking through your night vision, and you're watching some kind of crazy space battle going on up there, right? War games, testing of weapons. That is a whole nother. That takes things right into a Buck Rogers type of world, if this is what they are going to put together. And you have to test that equipment. And now we have the ability with telescopes and night vision, not only goggles, but you have all of the Celestron binoculars and the ability to look into the stars at night. Yeah, and it would be like I said, you would have to have war games. I want to get right over to the book, Nick, because when I think of you, cryptozoology and black-eyed children and Bigfoot and Mothman. This I get the new one, and it's Alien Abduction Files, and I'm thought, here we go. All right, Nick, this is pretty cool. Well, the book turned out to be really, really good, and I was impressed with it. But I have to ask you, why write it? What inspired you to go here?
Well, I've done a lot of books over the years. I think this is actually the 50th one, and so when you're writing books, and you're also a reader of books, as I am, you want to be able to give the audience something new. I mean, there's no point really just sort of going over old ground. So I'm always sort of careful to try and come up with an idea that I think people would find intriguing and which largely hasn't been done before. Now, the book's called Top Secret Alien Abduction Files. Now, people might say, well, what can you say about alien abductions that hasn't been said before? We've got books like Whitley Strieber's Communion, Bud Hopkins' Missing Time, and The Interrupted Journey about the Betty and Barney Hill case. So, it's been covered a lot. But one of the things that hadn't been covered to a significant degree was the whole issue of what government agencies know about alien abductions. And so that's the theme of the book. It's a study of cases and official files declassified through the Freedom of Information Act, which demonstrate for decades that there have been sort of groups within government that have taken an interest and a concern in the abduction phenomenon. So that's basically the theme of the book, like taking the abduction angle to a different level, if you like.
What did you ultimately find out that you didn't know before?
Well, one of the things I found was that there were more than a few agencies and departments within both the United States and the UK that over the years had taken an interest in the abduction phenomenon. This is going back till the early 1960s, which, interestingly enough, was pretty much the same time when you had the Betty and Barney Hill case, which was that classic case that really kicked everything off in 1961. Now, a lot of people don't know that the Air Force actually opened a file on the Betty and Barney Hill case, and it actually discusses the case itself very seriously. It's no talk of crackpots or anything like that. It was like a very sober report on their experience and where it happened and what they saw and references to these beings. And interestingly enough, Betty herself said at one point when she was speaking with the Air Force about her experiences on the phone, somebody who was on the conversation said, "Can we put you through to a different department?" And Betty said she never found out who this other department was, but they were extremely interested in her abduction experience, and that kind of that mystery of who this organization was or this body was that were very keen to speak to her. She shared the information, but was never told who exactly it was on the other end of the line.
Did you find out?
No, I didn't. But I mean, what I did find, though, is that most of the agencies and departments that were looking into this, and as logic dictates, are still looking into it, were not just sort of your average bodies in the military, etc. It was actually specifically like intelligence agencies and intelligence departments, like military intelligence, Air Force intelligence, Army intelligence. So, in other words, they were looking at this as from the perspective like an intelligence gathering type of situation, where there was clearly concerns on the nature and the frequency of these events. What was going on? Is this something that's going to increase? What are the reasons for the abductions? And I found a number of themes running through these cases. One of them, interestingly enough, which came from the UK files, declassified files from the National Archives just outside of London, where the government keeps its declassified files. I found a number of files, which dated from just a couple of months from after the Betty and Barney Hill case, which was September 61. So we're talking about sort of early 62. Mm-hmm. And the British Royal Air Force, their intelligence department, was collecting reports of young girls who had reported to their parents, and then the story got out, where they talked about how they'd been woken up in the middle of the night and seen like this ball of light out of the side of the window, and they felt compelled to go to the window, and then there was like a period of missing time. Now, this is sort of classic examples of what we see in abduction cases. Very, very often it starts, young in life, and people go to the window and have this experience, and they're missing time. They can't remember everything. And the British Royal Air Force was actually actively collecting these reports and interviewing these young girls, 16, 17 or 18, about their experiences. And I was actually able to get these files through the Freedom of Information Act and use quotes from them in the documents. And these aren't, friend of a friend tales. Anyone can now go to the National Archives and read these files. But the big question, of course, is what prompted the British intelligence, just a few months after the Betty and Barney Hill case, to suddenly start looking into cases involving young people feeling compelled to go to the window late at night and see these lights. Clearly, someone knew far more about this phenomenon, and we can gauge that from the files to a degree.
How many cases were there? How many girls were involved?
Well, in terms of the UK cases, I found these are just the ones that I found, because you have to just dig through this sort of massive old sort of archive of literally hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pages, if not more. Right. But I found 9 altogether. Now, one of the most interesting one dated from the mid-1960s, and a young woman named Diane Fuchs, and she was driving home from her home back home from work in central England, and she saw this strange light in the sky, and she said it beamed like these rays of light down to the car. It affected the headlights of the car, and these are what are known as vehicle interference cases in ufology, where these craft seem to have the ability to affect the cars. And in this particular case, the witness, Diane Fuchs, told her parents what happened, that she'd seen this object in the sky. She was driving home from work like 11 o'clock at night, and she was crossing something called the Montford Bridge in this little village, and this object was in the sky, classic flying saucer, beamed down this light, affected the car headlights, and terrified her and sent like a shooting pain through her arm. She got back home in a state of like terror and fear, told her parents, who contacted the police, who contacted the Air Force, local Air Force base, and an intelligence officer came out. And from there, the Air Force took a great interest in her story and asked a lot of weird questions, such as, did she have any weird dreams after the encounter? What did you feel? How did you feel when the object beamed this light down to you? And it turns out that they'd also spoken to another person in the same village, a Mr. Griffin, and the Air Force had spoken to him. He lived just literally half a mile from where she lived. And it turned out that this Mr. Griffin had previously spoken to the Air Force before Diane Fowlkes, and it turned out that he had reported being taken on board a UFO and had vague memories of being laid out on this table and strapped down and these strange creatures surrounding him. So, and this was from the mid-'60s, and if you hadn't gone looking for these files, we wouldn't even really know, that the British military was asking all these kind of questions about abductions that we didn't start doing until like the 70s and 80s for the most part,
Yeah, that is fascinating. And we need to take a break right here. When we come back, we can kind of set this up for when we return, Nick. Is that when did it, in a historical perspective, when did it like change from contactee to abductee? And are they one and the same? But the name and the abduction phenomenon, I found out from reading the book, but when you reach back, before 1960, that I think is a big surprise for everybody. And that's why I really enjoyed reading the book, because I ended up learning something that, quite frankly, we have Betty and Barney Hill, we have Betty Andreessen, and we have some of these other famous cases, and of course Whitley, which is also in the book. Yeah. But going back, it wasn't isolated here to the United States, but Britain has some of the most amazing and compelling cases, I think, of all of the abduction phenomenon. So let's take a break right here, and I do want to get into the history of this, because I think it's something that this audience needs to learn. We need to figure this out. Nick, stay right there. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Hey, Nick, what's your Twitter?
Nick Redfern UFO.
Nick Redfern UFO. Of course, I knew that. Yep. We'll get it right up there on Twitter. And I'll be right back with our guest, Nick Redfern. Stay with us.
This is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
This is KGRA Digital Broadcasting Station, Salt Lake City, Utah, Van Buren, Arkansas.
Folks, this is very important information. What's to be said about CBD? AncientLifeOil.com. Our CBD is made from hemp and has 0.003 THC, which means this wonderful product won't get you high, no matter what amount you take. What does CBD do for the body? My hands are tied. But you can Google CBD benefits and be astounded. When you're finished reading, you'll want to log on to AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com and purchase. Life is good when you feel good. People are tired of pain. People are asking for non-GMO organic products to help them with you fill in the blank. Legal in 49 states, and again, our CBD is made from hemp. Ancient Life Oil is about helping people one by one by one. If you wonder how good the product is, the CEO takes it every day without miss. AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com. Have a great day.
Hello, I'm Katie, and you're listening to my main man, Jimmy Church, on JimmyChurchRadio.com.
Hi, this is Ray Hobbs here, repping the planet, and you're listening to my good friend, Jimmy Church, Fade to Black, on the Game Changer Network and the KGRA Digital Broadcast Station.
This is Toby Kebbell. You're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com. Don't hurt me, Jimmy. I'm only little.
Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier. And this is Ari Gold. We're the Honey Brothers. Yes. We are of the Honey Brothers. Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier. And I'm Ari Gold. We're the Honey Brothers. And you're listening to Jimmy Church. The Revolution.
Reclaim your active lifestyle with Angioprim. Angioprim is the original liquid oral chelation supplement. Chelation helps remove toxins, heavy metals, and cholesterol in your veins and arteries that can cause blockages. Scientific research proves the active ingredient in Angioprim has superior oral chelation action that helps promote cardiovascular health. Find out more. Go to angioprim.com. Talk to a trained consultant by calling Angioprim toll-free 877-882-7221.
This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and you can become an official Fadernaut by just going to our membership section at jimmychurchradio.com.
Hey, it's Grace. Can we talk about something serious for a minute? Your age. Getting old has its perks. But remember, being a few years younger, you know, your hair was thicker, you didn't have so many wrinkles, that extra weight wasn't haunting you, and you just felt better. Well, we can't turn back the clocks and go back 10 or 15 years, but you can start feeling and looking 10 or 15 years younger with Nature's Youth RSF. It's a doctor-formulated daily supplement that helps your body maintain its peak performance and fight the aging process. Imagine sleeping better, looking better, and feeling better. See how Nature's Youth RSF has helped thousands of people just like you at nature'syouth.com. nature'syouth.com. Imagine how it will feel when your family and friends are asking you what you did to look so good. Your secret will be Nature's Youth RSF. It's time to start looking better and feeling better. Learn more and order your Nature's Youth RSF at nature'syouth.com. That's nature'syouth.com. That's nature'syouth.com.
Hello, this is Serena Wright-Taylor from Conscious Life Expo, and you're listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church, who holds the Lucky Pony record for the best astrological chart since 1963. True story.
This is Micah Hanks of the Gralien Report, and you're listening to Jimmy Church on Fade to Black, across the globe on the Game Changer Radio Network and the one and only KGRA Radio, The Planet.
Welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, Nick Redfern. I got Nick's Twitter up there. In Twitter, everybody go follow Nick. We're talking about his new book, Top Secret Alien Abduction Files. I'm holding it up to the camera. It's a great book. What the government doesn't want you to know. And Nick, let's do a little alien abduction 101, if we could. Let's kind of set the tone here. When we look back to the contactee phenomenon of the 50s, George Van Tassel, Adamski, they all went to Venus, right? Is that an abduction?
Allegedly.
Yeah, allegedly, if you know what I mean. But is that different from an abductee?
Well, it is, and I point this out in the book because for people who might be thinking, well, you know, the idea that the government watches people who claim to have had alien encounters, you know, like close-up encounters, they might say that's bizarre. Again, we can prove this through the Freedom of Information Act, and I'll explain what I mean by that. Now, although the alien abduction phenomenon didn't largely begin, or at least it wasn't in the public domain until the early 60s with the Betty and Barney Hill case, from the early 1950s onwards, before the abductees, there were the contactees. Now, these were people who claimed face-to-face contact with aliens who looked very much like us, except they were sometimes described as being significantly taller and with long hair, long blonde hair. Now, whereas in the abduction cases, you know, people are taken away, abducted against their will, in the contactee cases, people felt sort of compelled to go out into desert locations where they would meet these sort of human-looking aliens who would essentially sort of relate how they would prefer that we, the human race, live our ways, and they would talk to people about how we should lay down our nuclear weapons and be friends with each other, otherwise we're going to destroy the planet. And a lot of these people, it was almost as if they were mind-controlled, and they felt compelled to sort of write books and hold conferences and lectures. In other words, it was as if the aliens were sort of doing or we were doing their work for them by proxy almost, if you like, and you had these people who became almost like gurus, and they would, attract hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands and thousands of people to their lectures and seminars. Now, when word got out, that there were a lot of these people talking about alien encounters and how the aliens wanted to disarm our atomic weapons and so on in the early 50s, the FBI actually opened significantly long files on many of the early contactees. For example, George Van Tassel, who created the Integratron out at Giant Rock in California, George Van Tassel's FBI file is just over 300 pages in length. George Adamski's is about 140. Truman Bethlehem, who was one of the lesser-known contactees in the 50s, his file's about 50 pages. George Hunt Williamson's is about 70, and I could go on and on and on. The FBI opened files on somewhere in the region of about 15 of the early contactees in the 1950s, and most of the files have now been declassified into the public domain. But they talk about how the FBI sat in the audience and make notes and, reported back to J. Edgar Hoover as to, the beliefs that the contactees had about the aliens and why they were here and why we should lay down our atomic weapons and so on. So, in other words, the reason why I talk about this in the first chapter in the book, because it acts as sort of like a precedent for what came in the 60s. Already in the 50s, the government was watching people who claimed face-to-face alien contact. So it made even more sense that when people reported being kidnapped and, having their minds wiped, their memories wiped, you can then see why it made a great deal of sense that they would continue the surveillance, when it went from the contactee arena to the abduction arena.
What was the period of change? When did the first? I like the way you say kidnapping. Right, that was actually pretty good.
Well, I mean, it's difficult to say for sure, but what we can say with certainty is that the visibility of the abduction phenomenon certainly began with the Betty and Barney Hill case in September 1961. And the reason being that the story got out, and John Fuller wrote a book called The Interrupted Journey, all about Betty and Barney Hill's case. Now, it's important that case was seen as the first abduction case, but if you look at the history of it now, it really wasn't the first case. What it was the first one, the first abduction case really, that was accepted by the UFO research community and that also caught the attention of the media and the general public as well. But in later years, people have said, well, my grandmother or my grandfather had an experience back in the 1920s. So, we can push the barriers back a long way, but when it started to be spoken about publicly was the early 60s. Now, there were still some contactees around, and there are still some around to this day, but there's no doubt that the abduction phenomenon quickly eclipsed the contactee phenomenon. And for a lot of people, even in ufology, the contactee movement was seen as like as a redundant, quaint kind of cultish type societies or whatever, which actually wasn't really the case, but it was the case that, it did become dominated and sort of overwhelmed by the abduction movement.
I just got, this is from the UK. I'm just going to do this as a little favor. I got a friend over in the UK that who's got a podcast that he's doing. He lives in Dover, actually, and he wants to know for you, who are the top British ufologists that should be mentioned?
That's a good question. I would say one of them is Gary Heseltine. Gary's a retired police officer, and he puts a conference on in England every year. And I would say Gary's definitely one of the leading ones because, you know, he's a background in the police force. You know, he's grounded and he knows how to sort of interview people and chase down mysteries. But also he's someone who's done a really good job of collecting and filing and collating reports of police officer-based cases. And so as a police officer himself, you know, he's had a lot of input from colleagues and so on. So I think, you know, that aspect alone of the phenomenon, you know, Gary's done a really good job of kind of, you know, addressing this particular angle.
His name is Jimmy, and his son, Micah, they do this podcast, and his son is like 8 years old. Just spot on his game, Nick. Spot on his game. You should.
Yeah, that's wild when you're 8 doing that.
Yeah, you know, he's called into the show a few times. I got to tell you, he's a sharp. He's got a big future in this community. So,
that's good.
Yeah, keep your eyes peeled for that. Now, I want to go back actually to Adamski for a moment. To have a 300-page, not Adamski, I'm sorry, Van Tassel.
Van Tassel.
Yeah, to have a 300-page dossier by the FBI, they're not going to do that because you're an interesting dude. They're going to do that because you've got something that they need, you know. And why 300 pages on Van Tassel, who I think, you know, and I'm going to say something else. I'm glad that you not only bring up Van Tassel in the book. And George Van Tassel, in a large sense, is not of note in the UFO community. You've got to go and dig or be seriously interested in the subject to go and get into George Van Tassel. I think he's one of the most fascinating aspects of all of ufology. Why would the FBI have such an interest in him?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's important to know. You made a good point there, Jimmy, when you said most people in ufology today don't know about George Van Tassel. That's very true. You know, back in the 50s, there were so many people in the Contactee movement, and they were, you know, really big names, but time went by, people forgot them, they got elbowed, you know, out of the picture by the abduction movement and things like Roswell and Area 51, and it became sort of like a part of forgotten ufology. But back in the 50s, you know, the Contactee issue was the dominating one. There's no doubt about that. Now, the FBI files on Van Tassel show that on 3 occasions they visited him at his home and also sat in the audience at a number of his lectures and conferences and made notes, etc. And the approach was not, you know, poking fun at him or anything like this or suggesting he was a liar. They were asking questions about, you know, tell us what happened in your encounter, you know, where did it happen, what time of the night or day, you know, what did the creatures or the aliens look like, what did their craft look like. And they were particularly interested, as the files show, in his beliefs about religion. For example, he believed that the legend or the story of Noah's Ark, he believed that Noah's Ark was one of many arks, which were actually space arks. And he believed, or he was told, but supposedly by his alien friends, that the story of the Great Flood occurred, but he was told that the ark, that was a distorted story based upon numerous space arks taking animals and people who could survive the flood and then could be deposited back on the planet when sort of the turmoil was all over. He also said that the Star of Bethlehem was a UFO, and Ezekiel's wheel was also a flying saucer. And all of this was sort of very soberly written in the FBI's files. And, you know, they took a deep interest, even to the extent as far as late as the 1960s, sitting in the audiences at his lectures and carefully noting just about every claim and theory that he was sharing with his audiences. So in other words, when you read the files, it's not like they're talking about the contactees as crazy people who need to be watched, for everybody's safety. It was just straightforward questions. Tell us what you saw, how you felt, what did the craft look like, and so on. And of course, Van Tassel is noted for his Integratron, which is out at Landers in the California desert. The Integratron being this two-story circular building, which, according to Van Tassel, had he finished it, would provide like an extensive lifespan, or even, as he felt one day, immortality. But the secret died with him, unfortunately. But he was a fascinating character, and he was sort of a major player in 1950s ufology. I mean, just to give you an example of how popular Van Tassel was, and how he kind of eclipsed even today's ufology. He would put on an outdoor conference or festival, if you like, every summer throughout the 50s. And at its height, that festival attracted around about 12,000 people a year.
That's right.
You go to conferences now, you'll get like 300 or 400 people in the audience, which is quite respectable. But 12,000 just blows out the window, anything from today, really.
Yeah, you go and you look at those old black and white films of his festival out there, 15, like you just said, 12,000, 15,000. Yep. Think about that for a second. Just put that in perspective. Absolutely incredible. And there was one other thing that Van Tassel, he did this sensational sit-down interview that you can find online for television. And in that interview, he discloses, and this is fascinating to me, that he built a time machine in downtown Santa Monica, California, right? And he talks about it, he gives the location, and he says that his friends, his ET friends, gave him a formula. I don't have it in front of me right now, but gave him a formula to record time up to 7 years in the past, and he built this machine to do it in a building in downtown Santa Monica. Now, Nick, for me, yeah, it's a pretty good revelation. It's a pretty good thing to say, but he's so matter of fact about it, right? He just spoke as straightforward as anybody else that you could think of, like the guy next door. And it's George Van Tassel talking about ETs and a formula in a time machine in a building that he built in downtown Santa Monica. It's incredible. But today, nobody knows about George Van Tassel in ufology. He should be spoken about every day.
Well, it's interesting you should say that, because one of the reasons why Van Tassel was watched was, despite the fact that a lot of his claims were extremely controversial, he actually, for a long time, worked out at Hughes Aircraft, and he was actually close friends with Howard Hughes. They literally were close friends. They would have dinner together with his wife and with Van Tassel's wife. And, of course, Howard Hughes, Hughes Aircraft was a company that was heavily, tied to the military and doing, work for the military. But also, Howard Hughes had ties to the CIA as well. So, in other words, it was the threads and the connections that Van Tassel had, like Howard Hughes, that also placed him under surveillance, because this was someone who was, plugged into the world of U.S. military aviation and all sorts of facilities.
Howard Hughes would fly out at night to Van Tassel's airstrip and have pie, his wife's famous pie. And then fly.
That's true. That's absolutely true. Yeah.
Absolutely true.
Mrs. Van Tassel made these sort of great fruit pies, which Howard Hughes kind of got addicted to, and so whenever he could fly out, because Van Tassel actually built like an airstrip for planes to come in and land near to the Integratron. And she would cook pie for them all, and they would sit around talking about UFOs. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Don't you wish you had a time machine? I mean, how just, when I would listen to Van Tassel tell these stories, we're sitting around, Giant Rock, Howard wings in, and I turn to my wife, is the pie fresh? Yes, it's fresh. I mean, you just got to love it.
It's kind of like, in Twin Peaks, when they're always talking about the pie, the cherry pie and everything.
And the coffee. Right, yes. Oh, man, spicy apple pies, according to one of our Twitters right there, IPD. Now, okay, this is, as you start to research this, when did things, take this sinister turn? Because, look, with Betty and Barney Hill and his regression, and you listen to the trauma of the tapes of that, okay, yeah, it was pretty traumatic. But things definitely started to take a sinister turn. When did that start to happen?
Well, certainly the Contactee movement was at its height from sort of about 52 to about 58. It started to sort of trail off a little bit, but never went away completely. But certainly the late 50s, it started to fade away, and people predominantly focused on just UFO sightings and reports, objects in the sky. Now, the Betty and Barney Hill case, for people who don't know, September 61, they're returning from a vacation in Canada, and on the time back, or on the journey back, I should say, they had a period of missing time. And they knew something weird had happened. They even knew something weird was going on at the time. They were seeing this thing in the sky, and they were getting more and more traumatized and worried that it seemed to be following them. And they got back home and found that there was a period of missing time. They started to have nightmares and sort of frantic dreams over the next days and weeks of being taken on board this craft and sort of subjected to like a lab animal, that kind of thing, and sort of genetic issues as well, reproduction aspects to the experiments, and saw these strange creatures which they weren't described, as a lot of people think, like the classic Greys aliens of today. They were shorter than normal, and they had these penetrating eyes, but they were sort of more humanoid, and they suffered quite greatly with nightmares and things like this, and Barney even developed stomach ulcers, and they were eventually persuaded to go and see someone to try, like a psychiatrist, to see if they could be helped. And it turned out that there was a connection between the Air Force and one of the psychiatrists, which may actually not have been a coincidence. Some people think that that the Air Force may have actually wanted to get in on the case, and then John Fuller, who was an author, saw this being a great story, wrote their story, got permission and their confidence to write the story, and The Interrupted Journey was like a huge selling book. So it was really early to mid 60s that things began to go from being benevolent space brothers talking to us out in the desert to these creepy little characters kidnapping people and doing all sorts of experiments on them, and really from the mid-60s onwards, the abduction angle was sort of the dominating factor when it came to UFO cases involving entities.
Now, and we're going to discuss this more as the evening goes on, but there's another twist to the abduction phenomenon that you discuss at length in the book, which is the MyLab situation, and also you discuss who are the abductors. So we have two things that seem to be going on here, and I have asked a lot of abductees, is there a possibility that this could be terrestrial, right? Could this be us that are, staging these abductions to make them seem like it's ET, which is, to me, Nick, is just as sinister as if it's ET. So let's discuss that for a second, and we'll get a little bit deeper after the break. But how many of these could be us, our own Air Force?
Well, I don't know. I would say it's the Air Force, but there are cases on record where people claim to have been abducted and, as if they're under some sort of mind control, hypnotism, that kind of thing. Their mind is not normal. They feel sort of spaced out, almost if they've been drugged, and they've been taken on board a UFO. Now, there are a few cases, and granted they are a few, they're not sort of anywhere near the number of what I guess you would call regular alien abductions, if there is such a thing as a regular alien abduction. But in these sort of smaller number of cases, people have claimed to have sort of come out of this haze, and suddenly the so-called alien greys turn out to be sort of 6-foot-tall, burly military guys in black, like SWAT suits, that kind of thing. And this has given rise to a theory that perhaps in a small number of cases that mind-altering technology has been used, not necessarily directly for issues relating to the UFO phenomenon, but basically trying to determine, hey, if we can make people believe if they're seeing aliens, we can make them believe they're seeing anything. That was kind of the approach. In other words, it was allegedly the stories are born out of the MK Ultra program of the CIA in the 50s, which was the predominant mind control project of the CIA in the 50s. And one of the theories is that the CIA knew there were genuine abductions, but they realized that they could also use the alien abduction phenomenon as sort of a cover to test their own technologies on unwitting victims, and to use the UFO phenomenon as a way of gauging how successful this mind control technology and substances and cocktails might be. So, this is where it gets really confusing, in the sense that we have what I believe are genuine abduction experiences, and then you have people in the intelligence community using mind-altering technologies to try and determine if they can fabricate UFO events, really to see how successful and powerful, these mind-altering technologies can really be. So that makes it, extremely complicated to try and figure out which abductions are ours and which are somebody else's. And it's interesting that scenario was also touched upon in the X-Files on a number of occasions, where you had real abductions and fabricated abductions as well.
How sinister is that, right? We're supposed to have our government here to protect us, but we have what I think are numerous credible reports of our government being involved in this, and in some cases, Nick, working side by side with aliens and ET.
Well, it's interesting when you say about the government, because one of the things I found out or concluded during a lot of the research for the book is that it seems that most of the departments, offices, however you want to term them, that are doing this abduction research and possibly the fabricating side as well, don't seem to be from the government per se as we understand it. It seems to be that they're sort of like black budget funded organizations that actually operate outside of the government itself. In other words, we're talking about black programs that are buried so deeply and which are funded from outside sources that even the government isn't aware of them, which is, gets into really controversial and confusing areas when these organizations operate outside of governments, but they're so powerful and buried so deeply that the elected government and the agencies like Air Force Intelligence, CIA, etc., may actually not know who's doing this. It's like they're buried so deep that even the people we assume would know are actually out of the loop.
Let's take a break right here. Our guest tonight is Nick Redfern. We are talking about his new book. I've got it right here. Hold it up to the camera. Top Secret Alien Abduction Files, What the Government Doesn't Want You to Know. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. I've got some Twitter questions for Nick coming up next, and you can follow Nick on Twitter, Nick Redfern UFO. This is Fade to Black. Be right back after this short break. Stay with us.
Way out here, we listen to Jimmy Church.
You're listening to Fade to Black.
Always on the edge of the hottest alternative talk. Jimmy Church with Fade to Black. KGRARadio.com.
¿Qué tal, mis amigos? Yo soy Mario Carson, el tiburón, y los invito para que escuchen a mi buen amigo Jimmy Church Radio. ¡Claro que sí!
Hurricanes, earthquakes, wildfires. This year we've experienced more than our fair share. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and last month I decided to make sure my family does not have to worry about food should we get caught in a real emergency situation. Introducing Numana, a healthy, storable product that tastes so good that you'll want to eat it every day instead of just during those times of duress. All Numana products have a 25-year shelf life, are MSG and GMO-free, no preservatives, and are made in America. With the Numana pack in your home, you'll be able to sleep at night knowing that you've protected your family. Not only have I tasted and tested, I own it. Now you can too. Just click on the Numana banner on JimmyChurchRadio.com and use the promo code Jimmy when you order. In addition to a discount, we'll send you an autographed Fade to Black t-shirt. Seriously, go Beckley Teppy. Do you want to be an official Fadernaut? Of course you do. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black. Just go to our membership section at JimmyChurchRadio.com.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7 with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
You listen to us, and we listen to you. And so does the CIA. KGRARadio.com.
If you have hard water, the lime scale not only leaves white spots, it clogs pipes and breaks down appliances, costing you hundreds of dollars in energy and wear. Eliminate lime scale and other water issues like brown staining and bad odors with HydroCare water products, available from Wave Home Solutions. Wave's affordable water systems don't use salts or chemicals. You'll love the way your water tastes, smells, and looks. Satisfaction guaranteed. For more information, go to bestwater123.com. That's bestwater123.com.
Are you intrigued by paranormal talk radio? You'll love the new paranormal radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the paranormal radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the paranormal radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
You are listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Oi, oi, I'm Reese Evans. You're listening to Jimmy Church. This is Revolution. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution is on radio. Ciao.
Welcome back. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Fade to Black. Our guest tonight, Nick Redfern. And yes, we're talking about his new book, Top Secret Alien Abduction Files, What the Government Doesn't Want You to Know. And it is an excellent book. I recommend it, and we're going to be talking about it for the rest of the night. And Nick, I don't know why, and it's weird. When I think about you, I think about Blister in the Sun. don't know why that song does. I don't know why.
Well, I do have to put a bunch of sunscreen on in the sun. So.
Yeah, I don't know why. It's a weird thing. Okay, I just admitted it. I've gone public. Darren from the UK, who's a fan of yours, wants to ask you this. He says he's from Cannock, UK. Do you know where that is?
Yeah, it's about 5 miles from where I grew up.
Oh, okay. He says he had a black triangle encounter lasting 15 minutes driving through Wales in 1988 to 1990. Later discovered a UFO group in Rugeley town. Where's Rugeley?
That's just a couple of miles from Cannock, yeah.
Okay, well, this is your hometown. And he said that, so he went to this UFO group, and Irene Bott was there, and he reported his encounter to her. He wants to know where she is today. Where's Irene Bott? Do you know?
I actually don't, but I knew Irene well. She used to run the Staffordshire UFO group for about 5 years, and then she retired from it and handed it over to a colleague of hers, Graham Allen. She just felt she'd gone as far as she wanted to go. You know, she felt she'd, got a lot of answers to the subject, a lot of good cases, and made a great deal of advances. But, she also had a job, etc. And so she retired or resigned from the group, and then Graham took over. But I don't think the group is in existence anymore. I think it closed down about 10 years ago, maybe something like that. It's not the easiest thing, really, to sort of run a monthly group, put conferences on and lectures. And as a lot of people who I know, when they put groups together, it isn't the easiest thing to do every month. The group unfortunately closed down, and I'm not really sure, what they're doing now, other than it's closed. But I don't think she's involved in the UFO subject anymore, though.
It isn't the internet great to have this kind of connection, just like this immediately? Cannock, UK. It's where you grew up. It's a small world, man, isn't it? It's just getting smaller. Getting smaller. Where I had one other question. I'll get back to Twitter here in a second, everybody. I promise you that. Going back to the picking up where we left off, there's one encounter, one abduction in the book. There's a bunch that I've never heard of, but it was the one with Jenny Randall, the Moore encounter. I want to stay over in the UK for a second. That is an unbelievable case. I'd never heard of it. Tell us about it.
Oh, yeah. Well, the one you're talking about goes back to 1987 and a large area of moorland in the north of England. And one particular morning, a guy was walking across the moor and saw this, like you could only describe, or he kind of described as like a goblin-type creature running across the moor, like a small humanoid-type figure moving quite quickly, and he was just sort of frozen to the spot, as most people probably would be, on a sort of 8 o'clock in the morning, crossing the foggy moors in England, and you see this strange humanoid figure. Well, he actually managed to snip a photograph of it, and which you can find online. And the witness left the area, went back down to the lowlands and the local village, and realized that he was missing a significant amount of time, which he could not account for. Now, from there, it got really weird, because just like Betty and Barney Hill, he began to have weird dreams and nightmares, particularly of like nuclear war and like an apocalypse, that kind of thing. As a lot of abductees do report that kind of thing. And now, it would have remained just as like an encounter with an entity, and then the creature was gone. But as he sort of dug into the story further, hypnosis, it turned out that he was taken on board this craft and basically, had the same scenario that a lot of other people report, namely, you're taken on board the craft, medical experiments, and so on. It got even weirder when he said that late one night there was a knock on the door, and two men identified themselves as working for the British Ministry of Defence, and they wanted to speak to him about his experience. And the weird thing was that he hadn't, apart from a couple of UFO researchers, he hadn't told anybody about this experience, never mind, share his name and address, etc. But these two men, who called themselves Jefferson and Davis, although they claimed to be from the British Ministry of Defence, they sounded far more like the classic Men in Black, who sort of look vaguely government-like, but there's always some weird aspects to the story, and that was certainly the case in this experience. They allegedly flashed MOD ID cards, but there was something about them that just didn't seem right, almost if they weren't even fully human. But they essentially, warned him not to talk about the experience, and the thrust of the interrogation, if you like, was for them to try and get the photograph that he'd snapped. And fortunately, it'd actually been handed over to a local UFO researcher, so he didn't even have it anymore. But what's interesting is the witness, who preferred not to have his name revealed to Jenny Randalls and another researcher named Arthur Tomlinson, who was investigating it. But they were able to prove that he actually was a serving police officer, which was one of the reasons why he was reluctant to go public with the story. With his name, but he was willing to share the story. Now, interestingly enough, Irene Bartu, the questioner from England, brought up, she actually had Arthur Tomlinson speak at one of her lectures once, and Arthur was one of the guys who investigated this case very closely, and when he spoke at the Staffordshire UFO group around about 1998, I had a chat with him and told him I was interested in this case, and he actually shared with me the real name of the police officer, which I agreed not to put in the public domain, and his name has still not been put in the public domain, but he is who he claims to be. And but it was such a weird scenario, of him seeing this craft, having this experience, and these two weird characters in black turn up when he hadn't even told anybody about the encounter apart from a couple of researchers. So the big question was, how on earth did these alleged MOD people suddenly know where to go to grill this poor guy about his UFO encounter?
Yeah, in the book, when you talk about his real name, I kept waiting for it, kept turning pages, right? But you didn't do it, and you showed that respect. Let's go back for a second. When we are talking about so many abduction cases, of which there's probably millions, right? There's a lot of this going on. Certainly not everybody can be crazy. This is a real phenomenon. But who is doing it? As you've compiled these cases and have looked at it, is it consistently one race of aliens and ETs, or is it across the board? Who is doing these abductions?
Well, predominantly, in nearly all the abduction cases, people report seeing the sort of classic little greys, the big heads, the black eyes, sort of vaguely insect-like. They are typically the ones that do the abductions and that do the medical experiments and so on. But there are some cases where people have said that in the side of the room, sort of looking from, by the wall, people have talked about seeing like a more spindly insect-like, like a so-called praying mantis type of alien. That's it. Sometimes people report seeing those on board the craft as well, almost as if they're sort of monitoring the abduction. Then you also get, in some cases, so-called reptilian-type creatures on board as well. But there's no doubt that the grey type is the overriding one that just about everybody talks about.
What are they doing it for? Now, we've gotten the reports, going back to Betty and Barney Hill. And we mention Betty and Barney so much because it's just so well documented. The case with the regression and for them to have such a not only a recalled memory, but the memory that they had leading up to it that wasn't part of an erased mind, if you will. But what is the purpose of it? We have lots of medical things that are going on, and other. What's the reason for it?
Well, there are various theories to explain why these things, whatever you want to call them, aliens or multidimensional things or whatever they are, when you sort of look at the theory or the cases, there are different theories that have been put forward. Now, you have the one theory that the so-called greys are on a evolutionary decline, and so they kind of harvest cells, DNA, etc., to try and boost their own species. And that, if that's true, that would suggest that we are so close to them genetically that they can do that, which suggests maybe some sort of lineage between us somehow. Then you have some of the more sinister theories, or the sinister theory, where people talk about being implanted with these strange little implants under the skin. Now, some people take the view that this is benevolence and that what's going on, it's, they're sort of tracking devices that allow the aliens to track the abductees. The more controversial theory is that people are being abducted with these implants, which will one day be switched on, and there'll be sort of an entire body all around the world of sort of Manchurian candidates switched on to perform specific tasks for the aliens, and if that's true, I'm not saying it is, but that's one of the theories, that would be quite sinister and disturbing as well. The idea of the flick of a switch, so to speak, you'd have this sort of entire
robots,
zombie-controlled abductees,
If these are happening as frequently as they are reported, it would seem that these treaties or agreements with our own government are real, and our government is allowing this experimentation and these abductions to happen. I know that you talk about this in the book, but this is we keep saying sinister over and over again, but it's like, holy crap, right?
Well, one of the reasons why I call it sinister because it actually is sinister. It's like if you think about it, citizens being kidnapped, abducted against their will, subjected to medical experiments that we don't really know the reason for, people talking about implants, and the only response we get from the greys is sort of like a telepathic message, don't worry, it's for your own good. Well, that doesn't really sort of give me a great deal of, warmth in the theory or the idea. I think, to just take these entities at their word when we don't really know why they're doing it. They say it's for our well-being. You have other really sort of almost like esoteric theories as well. For example, a guy named Nigel Kerner wrote 2 books on the possibility that the greys are sort of not living entities as we understand it, but sort of like biological robots which lack souls. And he believes in his 2 books, Songs of the Greys, and I forget what the other one's called now, but it's Nigel Kerner. He believes or concludes that the Greys are somehow trying to understand the human soul, and if they could understand it and sort of harvest it, then they could potentially have sort of immortality rather than just being biologically created robots with sort of biological robots with a limited lifespan. So that goes down really, dark and disturbing pathways. The idea that they're interested in or obsessed with the human soul as a means to sort of ensure they have immortality, if you like, and sort of splicing the human soul in some way with the greys. And Nigel's books are very, when you read them, it'll keep you awake at night. But the fact is, there are a lot of cases where abductees have said they felt their soul or their life force was being sort of ripped out of their body, and they had like out-of-body experiences in the abduction.
Are they limited to, we always picture, right, the lonely car out on the road, like Betty and Barney Hill. We keep going back to that. Out in the middle of the desert or out in the country. Is how many are like that, or do they happen in the middle of downtown Chicago as well?
Yeah, well, for the vast majority of the reports are when people are in isolated places. And I think that's an interesting thing, because it suggests that maybe even for however advanced they are, they're limited, that they're not able to, like you said, just abduct someone from downtown Chicago at 11 in the morning, someone's just going to Starbucks or whatever. I think this demonstrates that they are limited in how they have the ability to do the abductions. Now, when you talk about sort of vehicle abductions, I mean, there's a fascinating one from 1959 that I talk about, a guy named Jerry Irwin, who was an American soldier at the time. This was February 1959, and he was driving to Fort Bliss, Texas from Idaho, and he saw this strange light in the sky, came down from the sky, and he thought it could be a plane coming down, having a fault, and it was going to crash to the ground. So he parked his vehicle, left a note for anybody coming along saying, gone to check on a possible plane crash. Next thing he knew, he was in a hospital in Utah, and just outside Cedar City, Utah. And the files on Jerry's case are now in the public domain. They've been released through the Freedom Information Act, and they talk about how in March 59, just a week or so after, he was seen by a Captain Valentine, who was a military psychiatrist who spent a lot of time with Jerry trying to get to the bottom of this weird case where, he brought his car to the side of the road, and the next thing he knew, he was somewhere else, and then he was taken to the hospital. And the Captain Valentine's report reads eerily like an early description of an abduction, with the issue with the car, and that Jerry Irwin not really wanting to talk about this, but intimating that there was far more to the story that went back to his childhood, which is interesting because a lot of the abduction stories, start in childhood and go through people's lives. So, the Utah story of Jerry Irwin is a very interesting one, and a classic example of how these things seem to prefer to abduct people in isolated locations, like long, lonely roads like he was on, and specifically at night as well.
Yeah, and I have had weird things go down right here in Los Angeles. And I thought to myself, Nick, I literally went to the window, this is like 3 o'clock in the morning, and looked out expecting to see something above my condo. I'm thinking, now, how could this be? Well, this is Los Angeles. But what happened. I'm not saying I was abducted. Let's not go there. Well, not that I know of. But what happened, and it happened in a very populated area. How many times has this happened? Did you find a case where somebody was abducted from an apartment building in New York City?
Oh yeah, I mean there are. I wouldn't say they're all sort of lonely nights, 3 a.m. in the morning, going through the woods or whatever. It's not always like that, but certainly, there are a number of cases. But I mean, as a perfect example of another one that's actually occurred in the middle of the night, but in a very built-up area. There's a case from Chesapeake, Virginia, in January 1967. Now, what's interesting about this particular case is that a summary of it you can find online at the FBI's website. The FBI have a website called The Vault, and if you go to the Vault website, you can go to the FBI's declassified UFO files. There's about 2,000 pages, and one of those documents talks about, in a summary form, this January 1967 Chesapeake, Virginia case, and involves a guy who was a TV repair guy, and he was driving home at night in Chesapeake, so we're not talking about some isolated location. And he had a vague memory of being taken on board some sort of craft, which weirdly enough he described as having from the inside sort of like transparent walls. And, you could actually see in and out. Well, when you're inside, you could see out, but when you're outside, you couldn't see in. And this is actually similar to something that Travis Walton described in his experience, that it was like a translucent glass-like wall. Now, he described these entities that he saw on the way home in Chesapeake as being very small, sort of round about 3 to 4 feet tall, and he had no recollection from 8 p.m. till 4 a.m. until the story started to come back to him. So, this is a case, yes, it was late at night, yes, it was the early hours, but it was Chesapeake, Virginia. We're not talking about, the wilds of Canada or somewhere like that, the Pacific Northwest woods. But what's interesting about this case is that I wrote about this case a couple of years ago in an article for Mysterious Universe, and as often happens, you get feedback from the readers. And one of the people who responded to this was actually the granddaughter of the guy whose story I mentioned and which had been extracted from the FBI file. And she was amazed that that there was actually like this summary file held by the FBI and on the website. And we got talking, and finally actually got a chance to meet, and she brought all these pictures out of her dad, outside, with his arms folded outside of his TV repair shop and everything, and he clearly was the right guy. But what was interesting is that the summary of the FBI report just talks about him being taken on board this craft, having a period of 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. of missing time, and being surrounded by these small creatures. Now, when I spoke to his granddaughter, she told me a really strange story of how 2 Air Force intelligence operatives visited him. There was no threats, nothing like that. It wasn't anything disturbing. They just basically said, "Sir, we've been informed of your experience, and can you share, or are you willing to share with us, the data of and what you can recall?" And he was happy to do that. Invited them in. They sat down and had coffee, and he told the story, driving home, saw these strange craft, and so on. They asked a lot of interesting questions, also along the lines of, did he have any weird dreams afterwards, particularly dreams of like worldwide disasters and things like this. And bear in mind, this was 67. Those are the sorts of things that started to crop up in ufology in the 70s and 80s and the 90s, this apocalyptic dream angle that abductees have. But the Air Force seemed to have knowledge of that back then. Now, this was sort of very relaxed, situation where, they were just hoping he would help, and he said he would be happy to help. And but what was weird was that shortly after that, he then, the TV repair guy, he started to report that he was being followed. He told his mother, his wife, the girl's mother, that he's being followed by this guy in a black suit, and it wasn't like a normal guy, sort of black suit, black fedora, very tall, sort of really pale skin, and very skinny, and it was clearly she was describing one of the weirder Men in Black types that John Keel wrote about in, like, for example, the Mothman prophecies. And so what began for me as just this, literally like a one-page FBI document at the FBI's website, led to me to speak with his granddaughter. And then it turns into another story of an interview, sort of clandestine interview with two Air Force officers, and then being followed by this creepy Man in Black. all because of this period of missing time as he was driving home from Chesapeake. So, that demonstrates how a story that starts as pretty much nothing at all, expands into something of huge size,
Let's take a break right here, Nick, and we'll continue this when we come back. And we got to talk about Whitley. We'll do that. Also, Dulce. And you know what? Just New Mexico in general, right? What is going on there? This is Fade to Black. Our guest tonight, Nick Redfern. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hi, everybody. This is Rob Halford, the Metal God, on JimmyChurchRadio.com.
This is KGRA Digital Broadcasting Station. Salt Lake City, Utah. Van Buren, Arkansas.
Poor water quality is a major health issue, and it's only getting worse. Municipalities can't keep up, standards have dropped, and pollutants are increasing. Where does it all end? It ends by keeping the pollutants outside of your home with HydroCare's advanced systems available at Wave Home Solutions. No less than the best purification materials and processes have been developed by HydroCare to provide you with healthy, clean water for drinking, cooking, and showering. HydroCare far surpasses the competition in removing chlorine, odors, iron, lead, chemicals, limescale, and much more. Don't settle for less when it comes to your water. We'll take care of the toughest water problems for you, whether it's from a city or well source. Satisfaction guaranteed. For more information, call 888-997-WAVE. That's 888-997-WAVE. Or go to bestwater123.com. That's bestwater123.com.
Wave Home Solutions for a healthy, comfortable home.
Your contact for current news and trending topics. KGRARadio.com.
Does your basement or crawl space have a damp, musty smell? Well, watch out. That's a sign of too much moisture and not enough ventilation. And that can mean increased mold growth and the buildup of harmful toxins and gases. Don't bother with a dehumidifier. It just circulates the same unhealthy air. Now there's a better way to remove these dangers and odors. It's with the computerized Wave Moisture Control Unit that reduces moisture and expels pollutants.
We replaced our old dehumidifier with the Wave unit, and in only 3 weeks, our basement is dry and the musty smell is gone.
Wave units require no maintenance, no buckets of water or filters, and costs only pennies a day to run. Breathe better, live healthier with an affordable, no-maintenance Wave unit. Call 888-717-WAVE, 888-717-WAVE, or visit dryhealthyhome.com, dryhealthyhome.com.
Ride the wave. Wave Home Solutions for a healthy, comfortable home.
This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and I only drink Fade to Black blend coffee from Rivermoon. Just click on the Rivermoon coffee banner at jimmychurchradio.com. Promo code F2B blend.
So are you tired of being tired? Well, then it's time to get the tea. Hey, it's Lisa here to tell you about this all-natural, all-organic tea I've been drinking that has had great results for over 20 years. It's called Life Change Tea, and it's specially formulated to help detoxify and cleanse your kidneys, liver, colon, and blood all at once. The colon is one of the most ignored organs in the human body. The faster that waste is eliminated from the body, the less time that waste sits in our intestines, spreading toxins to our bloodstream. This tea helps cleanse chemicals caused by outside intruders from our entire digestive system. And get this, weight loss can be a side effect. And with continued use of the tea, you can experience clearer, healthier, younger looking skin, increased energy, and a happier outlook on life. So if you're tired of being tired, get the Life Change Tea at getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. And like me, you'll be glad you did.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi available, you can still listen to every minute of Fade to Black by just calling 605-562-4482. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and no extra cost if you have unlimited minutes. Just call 605-562-4482. You can listen to me, Jimmy Church, on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Go Beckley Tappy.
You want to know a secret? I love ponies. I really love ponies. I'm serious.
I couldn't stay sane without ponies to brush.
Why fade to black? Because you never got that pony, damn it.
This is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
Welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. I love it when Nick Redfern is on the show. I get to talk a little music. We didn't get food in yet, but a little heavy metal, a little punk rock. Right? Nick, we didn't even talk about, like Birmingham. But
no, we didn't.
But I love it. See, the thing is, and I know that you've been a part of this concept of being who you are. You like your music, right? You love your punk rock, your heavy metal, and that's the part of who you wear the shirts, you play the part, you look the part, but you talk about it, and you're not an illusion. You are exactly who you are, and you wear it proud. And I just want to thank you for that. It's tough.
Well, it's I'm who I am. I've got like 200 T-shirts, 5 biker jackets, and I don't even own like a regular. I actually don't own a collared shirt or a tie. I literally don't own anything. And this Friday night, I'm going to see Doyle from the Misfits. He's playing a solo show in Dallas.
Oh man, are you kidding?
No, he's on a club called Trees in Dallas.
Man, how old is Doyle these days?
Doyle's just the same, he's still got his same hairstyle with the point pushing off down from the front of his head, and he plays like a combination of his new stuff and mixes it up with about 9 or 10 Misfits songs as well.
How old is he?
He's probably like early 50s, something like that.
Yeah.
He's not that old compared to some of the other, the original Misfits, because he was actually still at school when he joined the band.
That's right. Yeah. You're absolutely right. They were already a generation above him. Yeah, I guess that's right. I didn't even think about it that way. What you spend a whole chapter on New Mexico and another chapter on Dulce. I got to go right there. What is going on in New Mexico? Certainly we have Roswell, but that can't be the reason why, or is it?
Well, I mean, New Mexico has a lot of weird UFO stories attached to it, and also abduction stories attached to it. Now, if you go back to the early to mid 1970s, you had the whole black helicopter phenomenon kicked off in conjunction with the cattle mutilation phenomenon as well. And so, the big question is, who's flying these black helicopters and why? Now, there's clearly evidence that whoever's flying them is monitoring the cattle mutilations. But there are also a significant number of cases from not just around the world, but specifically from New Mexico, where abductees have been reporting seeing these black helicopters over their homes, and it's almost like precariously close, as if they're monitoring the activities of the abductees, or possibly trying to even see an abduction take place as it occurs. There's good evidence that these black helicopters are part of some sort of unit that is monitoring the abductees. And it's a fact that particularly from sort of 75 to about 80 or thereabouts, there were literally dozens and dozens of stories of these black helicopters flying around northern New Mexico where there'd been abduction cases, and particularly around the Dulce, New Mexico area. Now, for people who know their UFO history, Dulce has this strange and controversial story attached to it of how supposedly there's an alien base under the mesa, which is called the Archuleta Mesa in Dulce, and all sorts of weird rumors of sort of hostile aliens kidnapping people and then taking them to vast underground caverns in Dulce and experimenting on them and all sorts of weird stuff. Now, the big question, of course, is, are those stories real, or are they disinformation to try and make the whole phenomenon look too over the top so people walk away from it, concerned that they're getting involved in something that's just, beyond what they feel comfortable looking into. But there's no doubt that whether you believe the stories or not, the fact is that significant numbers of cattle mutilations and significant numbers of black helicopters have all been seen in and around the Dulce area. So something is going on that does appear to have a tie-in with the black helicopter phenomenon.
Now, and then there's everything else that goes along with that. I want to stay with this for a second. There's not only mutilations, there's reports of human mutilations, and going into that zone is uncomfortable for a lot of us to contemplate and think about and even discuss. But this is something that is very, very real.
Well, yeah, and I mean, a lot of this story came out from Paul Benowitz, who was someone in the late 70s. Benowitz had a company called Thunder, which actually backed onto Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque. And he did contract work for the Air Force at Kirtland Air Force Base. And over time, he would see strange objects flying over Kirtland Air Force Base, and he came to believe that they were extraterrestrial craft. And he made the fatal mistake of sort of contacting the Air Force and other agencies and telling them what he saw, and so they then turned their attentions to him. And what happened from there was that somebody did not want Benowitz to get any further into what it was that he was looking into, these strange craft flying over or in and around the Kirtland area. And so what happened was that he was suddenly flooded with all these stories and accounts and whistleblower tales and even documents which suggested that Benowitz should turn his attention away from Kirtland and far closer to Dulce, where apparently he was told he would get the answers that he was looking for. And whistleblowers in the military and the intelligence community swamped Benowitz with these tales of, as you said, these sort of underground installations where supposedly there were hostile and dangerous extraterrestrials that were kidnapping people by the hundreds and thousands, and there were multiple layers in this underground facility, and people were being held there, and terrible experiments were being done on them. And it actually got too much for Benowitz. After a couple of years of all this and these clandestine meetings and these nightmarish tales, he pretty much had a complete breakdown and had to go into a facility for a while to recover. And he really did not go back to ufology after that. He just stayed away from it. But other people have looked into the Dulce story as well, and certainly the FBI's files on cattle mutilations, which are also on the Vault website, they talk extensively about mutilations in Dulce in the FBI's own files. So, that's an intriguing angle to it. But certainly, round that period, Benowitz was definitely getting a lot of really sort of nightmarish abduction-type tales directly from his whistleblower sources.
What about, so when we talk about Dulce and, Schneider and Benowitz and the underground facilities there, what about the inner earth in general? There's a lot of talk of being on a craft in a room, a medical table, examinations, weird medical tools and things hanging from the ceiling. Same things, but underground. And just like when I mentioned to you earlier about when you brought up maybe the alien bases are on the moon and, or here but they're not coming from somewhere else in the galaxy, right? But some of these abductions might just be from somebody from the inner earth.
Yeah, well, I'm not a big fan at all of, the hollow earth angle, But, the idea of underground facilities and installations, there's no reason to be in any way sort of skeptical of that. I mean, for example, the Russians, we know, one in the Ural Mountains, that they've developed like a vast underground installation, which is sort of built into one of the Ural Mountains, and in the event of a nuclear war, potentially, the U.S. intelligence suggests that, it could house thousands of people, for however many years was needed. It's kind of like in the United States, we've got the old NORAD facility. Lots of rumors about facilities out at Area 51, literally hollowed out mountains and hills, where the real work goes ahead. So spy satellites flying up above will not really see anything because most of the stuff is underground. So in other words, there's no reason whatsoever to believe that there should not be, or that it's out of the question that there could be underground alien facilities, because we're building things like that. Rather ironically, my dad worked as a carpenter for most of his life, and he actually worked on one particular place, which was actually a swimming pool at like a fitness center. But underneath it, you could go down like 40 steps, and it was actually a room that was designated for like the local government in the event of a nuclear attack. Now, if a direct strike, everybody had been wiped out anyway. But they did actually build this sort of bunker type thing underneath the fitness center's swimming pool. As bizarre as it sounds, my dad actually helped to build it, and so the idea of some sort of facility under Dulce isn't out of the question. Now, there's an even weirder story about this as well. Back in the 1960s, specifically 1967, the Department of Energy actually detonated an atomic weapon below Dulce. That's a true story, and it was called Project Gas Buggy. And the official story is that they detonated this small atomic device to try and determine how much natural gas was down there and how, it could be sort of harvested and used, as energy. But on the other side of the coin, you have the suspicion or the belief system that the atomic weapon was actually really detonated to try and destroy the alien base. Now, it is a fact that if you go to the nearby forest in Dulce, where the detonation went off, there are actually signs there that warn you to this day that it's illegal, in relation to the US government, it's illegal to actually dig underground in that area, which is even more bizarre. And none of that is hearsay. That's all fact about the atomic bomb being exploded right just 3 miles from where the base is supposed to exist. So, you've got those weird aspects to it as well.
Well, and there's a lot of people that live right there. It's remote, but there are towns and indigenous cultures that live right there.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I should stress this was a small atomic device, and it was detonated like a couple of thousand feet underground as a means to sort of, figure out how much natural gas there might be. And they're trying to open up areas, and figure out what they could do. But, I mean, that may well have been the official story, and it may be exactly what happened. But when you look at it from the perspective of the UFO angle, it's just a couple of miles somewhere, supposedly, there was an underground alien base which was out of control, and the government was frightened to send people in the sense that, that they're not going to come back, as it was if they'd gone rogue, and it was out of ground, Steve, to even the government. So a panicked government tried to nuke them, and you can actually, as strange as it might sound, you can actually make a case that that's what happened,
Unbelievable. Now, I had heard stories about that, and that possibly had to do with some of the cattle mutilations and other things because of the testing of the radiation. They had to go and cut the cattle apart to check for radiation and its effects on the inside of the animals, but I always thought that was urban legend.
No, I mean, again, if you go to the FBI's website, the Vault, vault.gov, go to the unexplained phenomenon section, click on that, and then click on animal mutilation, and you'll see the FBI's entire cattle mutilation file, which is about 150 pages, of which about 25 are all files on cattle mutilations and black helicopters all around Dulce. And these are FBI files and New Mexico State Police files, which I reproduce some of them in the book in terms of the content and text. And when you read them, it reads like sci-fi, because they're talking about finding tripod landing marks in and around Dulce, which with elevated radiation readings, cattle with their organs removed, and significant amounts of blood drained from the animals. And these are the FBI's official records on Dulce.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right here. I love the Vault.
It's a good website.
Oh,
the
man.
FBI are really good about releasing their files and making them easy to, obtain and, totally free. You can download them all in PDF format. And, they've done a really good job with that website.
Yeah, they did. And when it first kicked, till my eyes were just red. I spent so much time here, and I'm back at the site now. Thanks for that, Nick. Let's. What are you doing, Jimmy? I'm on the Vault. Just leave me alone. You spent a lot of time on Whitley Strieber, and I can't help but I want your reaction to this. Whitley coming forward. And writing that book that changed a lot for all of us, myself included. But I often felt compassion for all of the other abductees out there that refused to come forward after the teasing and the ridicule and some of the things that happened to Whitley after that. And he was very courageous in writing what he did, and you spent some time on it. Do you think that prevented a lot of kidnapping victims, if you will, from coming forward because of what happened to Whitley, the spying that happened to him, the teasing, the public shaming that he went through?
Well, yeah, I mean, for me, Communion is probably the most important alien abduction book. And the reason why I say that is because, dozens of abduction stories have been, put into books, etc., for 20 years before that, going back to the 60s with The Interrupted Journey. But, Strieber was a really good writer, and he had a very personal story to tell. And also, his book wasn't just sort of focused on scientists from other worlds taking our DNA. There was sort of a lot of almost mystical material in there as well.
No doubt.
And we took it into sort of very different areas where some UFO researchers weren't expecting that. But I thought, it was a really cool, refreshing approach. But the reason why I mention Whitley in the book was because after it was published, he started to get some really weird things happen to him. For example, he would get these hang-up phone calls in the middle of the night, and they would get these calls where there'd be sort of like this deranged laughter down the line, and it was clearly being done to destabilize Whitley and his family by doing this in the middle of the night, and sort of jolting them out of a dead sleep. And bear in mind, this was sort of the early 90s, and so Whitley got what was back then pretty new. He got caller ID, and he was able to track back these phone calls from a company called EG&G Rotron. And it turns out that at one point, well, not one point, but for significant times, they actually did work for NASA, the Department of Energy, and even out at the Nevada Test and Training Range, which is better known as Area 51. And on top of that, he started to find, as he said in his own words, spooks started prowling around my neighborhood upstate. And somebody flashed an NSA card to one of his colleagues and trying to find information out on Strieber. Now, the story gets even weirder because just 1 year after Communion came out, a journalist named Ed Conroy wrote a book called Report on Communion, which was Conroy's own study of Strieber's book and his claims. So he's basically like an impartial journalist taking a look at his story. It turns out that when Ed Conroy started to do the research into Whitley's book, then Ed started to get weird things happen to him, like strange messages left on his phone calls. Also getting weird black helicopters outside of his window. And he also had what I guess today we would call like a shadow person in his bedroom, which was a really strange scenario. And, you know, you put all those issues together of Whitley being watched, these sort of strange phone calls, tracking back to like NASA and Area 51, people actually breaking into his house and somehow overriding his burglar alarms. Then Ed Conroy, who writes his own impartial study of Whitley and his experiences, he then becomes a victim too. You put all that together and, you know, you have a significant situation in which probably the most famous alien abductee of all time was put under major surveillance by who exactly we don't know, but at least a couple of agencies.
The book, for me, Nick, and for everybody that's going to be reading this, it's disturbing. It's disturbing on all levels. And what do we take away from that? I mean, is there a warning? Is there some advice? I mean, what do we do with this? Well, I mean, the things that I can say for sure, having spoken to literally dozens of people for the book, most of who are, you know, speaking on the level, you know, they're not anonymous people, and the files are all listed so people can read them for themselves and go and find them. What I found is that, at least going back to the early 1960s, agencies, at least in the US and the UK, were aware of the abduction phenomenon back then to I would say, a fairly limited degree. Through the 70s and 80s, their knowledge obviously clearly grew. And it's still going on to this day. I've got the most recent case in the book is just like a year ago. But what I found is that many of the questions they asked back in the 60s and 70s, they're still asking the same questions to this day of the abductees. You know, why do you think they're doing this? Did you have any strange dreams? What were the dreams about? So it seems like they've got some of the answers, but also they're still grasping for other answers to the phenomenon. So I don't think, whether it's an agency within the government or whether it's some sort of black budget program that is sort of covertly funded and that essentially operates outside of government, which I think is more likely. But even they don't seem to have all the answers. Now, admittedly, there are, you know, some cases where people feel they've had positive experiences from abductions. You know, their lives have been changed. The cases where people have become vegetarian and they felt they're on like a pathway to help people. Those kind of cases are quite, you know, positive. But as I said earlier, you know, this angle of these strange creatures kidnapping us, taking our DNA, and assuring us, well, it's all for your own good, don't worry about it, you know, in all intents and purposes, you know, that's what they're saying. I'm not really sure we should just accept them at their word. And maybe I think that's the way the government looks at it. They can't prove that there's a danger, but still after all these years, they're still not sure that this is all kind of kosher, you know. Well, Nick, okay, you're in your apartment. You're on a lonely road. It happens, right? And your car, you pull over, boom, there's ET, he's at your door. And he says, look, we're either going to take you or you can come with us. What do you do? I mean, do you go or do you put up a fight and then just get kidnapped? I'll probably blast him with a bit of the Misfits.
destroy their eardrums, But no, joking aside.
Oh, man.
Well, the problem is that most people feel as if they're mind controlled. When they have these experiences, that their self-will, their self-power goes away, and they either go with the aliens willingly, or it seems like willingly, or it's like they're sort of just placed under anesthetic, and the next thing they know, they're on the craft. There seems to be hardly any cases where the witness is placed in a position where they have the ability to escape or to flee the car and head to the woods and, hide out. It's almost as if, the mind control or the anesthesia, for want of a better term, kicks in almost immediately, and you don't even have time to think about getting out the area, unfortunately.
The book is called Top Secret Alien Abduction Files, What the Government Doesn't Want You to Know. Nick, thank you so much. Now, go play some Misfits, get ready for Doyle this Friday, and enjoy the rest of your night. Thank you so much, Nick.
All right. Thanks a lot, Jimmy.
You're the best, Nick. I really appreciate it. Nick Redfern, and his links for Nick Redfern 40 and, of course, blogspot.com are right there at jimmychurchradio.com. And I used to say it often. I'll say it right now. Whenever I need material, I go to Nick Redfern, and you should too. It's Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Thank you, Nick. I'll be right back. I'll open up the phone lines. Let's cruise out this last segment. I'll be right back. Stay with us.
Vivica Fox here, and you are listening to my boy, Jimmy Church, on jimmychurchradio.com.
Despite popular opinion, reading a book will not make you smarter.
But listening to Jimmy Church will.
Hurricanes, earthquakes, wildfires. This year we've experienced more than our fair share. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and last month I decided to make sure my family does not have to worry about food should we get caught in a real emergency situation. Introducing Numana, a healthy, storable product that tastes so good that you'll want to eat it every day instead of just during those times of duress. All Numana products have a 25-year shelf life, are MSG and GMO-free, no preservatives, and are made in America. With the Numana pack in your home, you'll be able to sleep at night knowing that you've protected your family. Not only have I tasted and tested, I own it. Now you can too. Just click on the Numana banner on jimmychurchradio.com and use the promo code Jimmy when you order. In addition to a discount, we'll send you an autographed Fade to Black t-shirt. Seriously, go Beckley Tappy. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and I take Life Change Tea supplements every single day. It's what I do. Click on their banner at jimmychurchradio.com. When you take the beans from Central America with dashes of Indonesian and African mixed in and then roast it to the dark side of Fade to Black, you create the ultimate brew of fringe. Introducing the Fade to Black blend from Rivermoon Coffee. Yes, Rivermoon's darkest customized roast was created for the love of Fade to Black. The alchemy of masterful roasting and smoking the beans is in every sip of this full-bodied, dark Java. I need my coffee dark, deep, with distinct bittersweet chocolate highlights, just like the bunker. Leaning further into the darkness of the roast is Fade to Black blend from Rivermoon Coffee. Just click on the banner at jimmychurchradio.com and use the promo code F2BBLEND for 15% off of your order today. Go Beckley Teppy.
Hi, folks. CBD is the home run hitter for health right now. Why, you ask? Because of what it does for the body. Unfortunately, I can't tell you all about the benefit. There's reasons. Do your due diligence and log on to ancientlifeoil.com. That's ancientlifeoil.com. Ancient Life Oil uses organic ingredients and is blended in coconut oil for some of the best benefits. Legal in 50 states and non-psychoactive. Log on to ancientlifeoil.com. That's ancientlifeoil.com.
This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and my family is safe because of Numana Emergency Food Storage. Just go to the Numana banner at jimmychurchradio.com. Promo code Jimmy10.
Are you intrigued by paranormal talk radio? You'll love the new paranormal radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the paranormal radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Erica, Brittany, Gabby, and you're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
It's not a lifestyle we chose. We were born this way. KGRARadio.com.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com.
All right, welcome back. Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. All right, opening up the phone lines. 323-825-5045 or 323-275-9695 or 818-921-6929. And I do want to thank Nick Redfern for coming in. The book is Top Secret Alien Abduction Files, What the Government Doesn't Want You to Know. And I'm not kidding. When it comes to the alien abduction phenomenon, we hear so much about it, and there are a lot of very famous cases out there. And Nick writes a book like this. You have to, take notice of it. And I learned an awful lot from this book. It is really, really good. So go and get yours. It's a good read. Okay, Nick Redfern, 40in.blogspot.com is Nick's website, and the links are over at jimmychurchradio.com. Let's go to area code 408. You're up on Fade to Black. Who's calling?
Hi, Jimmy. This is Deb from Sacramento. How are you?
Hey, Deb. How are you? First up. Wow,
Good.
You got through on the line.
I know.
Right on.
I know. I tried the other two lines first, and I couldn't get through, so this is my last option. I just had a quick question. I would love to get through Nick Redfern's book. I remember my first time trying to get through Communion. And I noticed a very interesting and kind of a disturbing pattern. Every time I got to information where it was scary or disturbing, I would start to get real drowsy, literally like I was being put into a trance, and I kept falling asleep. And and I don't know if that's called cognitive dissonance or where your brain can't handle it.
Mm-hmm.
But when under the abduction thing where people are being confronted with this and then they have like a lapse of time or you were talking about them just, going under a spell or the control being, I wonder if we automatically just have that embedded in us and they just like flip a switch and kind of, it's easy to take us because our brains can't handle it. I don't know, but it took me forever to get through Communion because of that.
You remind me of, and I remember exactly where I was when I read Communion, and it was in Pasadena. And I literally, and I'm not making this up, I mentioned this before on the show, I learned how to read with one eye, because I kept my other eye on my bedroom window. I'm not kidding. I could literally read. I was so freaked out. I mean, I got really, it was just something about the way that, first off, everything was occurring in like in a cabin or in a bedroom, and I'm in bed and I'm reading this and I'm waiting for. I felt like I was being watched. I felt like I literally learned how to read with one eye. I'm not making that up. That's a true story.
I believe it because I kept having, while I was trying to read it too, I'd have images of them like showing up in my room, even though they weren't there. My mind and my imagination, because of the way he writes it, is so good that you start to imagine like this happening to you while you're reading it, and it freaks you out.
I didn't sleep. I don't know how you got into drowsy mode. When I went through. And during that period, because he brought up an interrupted journey a few times tonight. I certainly have on this show many times. That and Fowler's book, Betty Andreessen. Those two books combined with Communion. I did not sleep. I could not stop reading those. I would read them. I remember I'm not kidding. I would wake up in the morning. I would get up in the morning and go out. And my roommates would be there, and I would have to act like I just got up. Right? That was the game. I was up all night reading these books, and would come out. And I would have to like fake yawn. Oh, you want some coffee? And I knew that I had to go to work that day, and I was up all night reading Communion. You know, it's the Andreessen Affair did the same thing to me, and Interrupted Journey, which I read those books over and over again. But yeah, absolutely. I was the opposite. I couldn't sleep. I could not sleep.
You're a lot braver than me, Jimmy.
It is such it's such a great period of my life, those books and what I went through. Thank you so much, Deb. That was a great conversation tonight with Nick, wasn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. I always see him on Ancient Aliens when I know he's going to be on. I make sure to tune in. Yeah, he's fascinating. I want to try to get his book. Hopefully I won't fall asleep trying to read it. I think I've been exposed to enough now where I can handle a lot more now.
Somebody should post. There is a picture out there on the web of Nick and I. I'm standing behind Nick, and we both have sunglasses on, and we're looking off into the distance. I don't know who took the picture. But it's really cool. Nick and I, because he's all rock and roll and I'm looking all businesslike, but nonetheless, we're looking off, and it's a great picture of the two of us. I don't know what we're looking at, and the picture was taken from a distance, but it's a really cool picture of Nick and I. Somebody should post that. I haven't seen it in years. Thank you so much, Deb.
Hopefully the people listening, hopefully someone will post it.
Somebody will post it. Somebody will post it right now. We'll see you tomorrow night.
Yeah, absolutely. Take care.
Have a great night. Somebody post that picture of Nick and I. Somebody's got that out there. I don't even think I have it. And I'm not going to spend the time to look for it. So, all right, let's go back to the phones, switch phone banks here. Let's go to area code 601. You're up next on Fade to Black. Who's calling? Oh, well, there that call goes. And I'm going to reset that phone line. It was weird. It was there and was gone, and now I've lost that phone bank. Oh, man. Go figure. Yeah, somebody post that picture of Nick Redfern and I. That was pretty cool. And I want to go back. There is the point about Nick that I made at the beginning of the show, and this is a very serious point that I was never able to shake from Nick, which was I'm going down the line, right, of this panel, and I remember specifically Nick being down on the end. He was like the last one, and after I think Steve Murillo was on that panel, right, and I'm going through and. How do you think aliens are getting here? How do you think E.T. is getting here? And it was the same question over, and after everybody and Stan Friedman and Nick comes back with, man, and Nick didn't, I think he said his dad talked to him about this when he was a kid, and that they're not traveling, at the speed of light and folding space and coming through wormholes and portals, that they are right here. And that's how it is happening. Now, if you combine that with this book, with abductions, that just maybe, and when we, I want to make it like this. I guess this is where I'm going. That they are just merely coming over here, and this is experimentation. When you flip it around, and we here on Earth, what do? Well, we go out and you go to the woods for the first time. There it is. That's it. Oh yeah, there's William Brown, downtown William Brown. That's the photograph. I got to retweet this. This is great. And thank you for that. I knew somebody would find it. The pic I was talking about. Thanks. Boom. Done. Retweet. What? I'm wondering what we are talking about here. Or what we're looking at. We're all doing the same thing. Man, Nick is so rock and roll. I remember this now. Okay, this was... I want everybody to go and look at this pic. I'll get back to the phones here in a second. This moment, this was at Contact in the Desert, okay? And, yeah, Nick's looking rock and roll. I'm doing my thing. But William Brown, I'm going to refresh everybody's memory. William Brown did about a 10-minute, 5 to 10-minute what do you call it? Conversation point that he made about physics, about light speed, particles, space travel, and propulsion systems, right? And he goes off on this 10-minute beautiful presentation, and it caught everybody by surprise. And I'm not kidding. Standing ovation. And if you were there, that moment for William Brown, if you were there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There was 2,000 people there, 2,000. And I went over, and the applause took off, and I went over and stood next to William, and I bowed. I forgot all about that. William Brown, that's an amazing cat right there. Thank you for this. Oh, all right. Yeah, this is cool, too. How did you do that so fast? Reverend Jimmy, you got some kind of program that turns everything into paintings? That's pretty cool. I like that. If you want to check out what we're talking about, it's at JChurchRadio on Twitter, hashtag F2B. And you can go and check that out. Okay, so anyway... where was I? Oh, yeah. So when we go out and we go into the jungles and we're in the rainforest, or we go to a tropical island or the Galapagos, or you're out in the desert and you're some kind of anthropologist and you're going out, you're collecting species. You know, you're bagging and tagging. And what goes on with this is could be, depending on how you want to look at it, pretty horrific, right? And do we consider, when we go into the Brazilian rainforest and we find a previously undiscovered species, whether it's an insect or a mammal or a reptile, and we go and we grab it and we split, now... And go. I'm talking about back and tag. Take this thing out of its element and back to a university in the United States. That is an alien abduction. That's exactly what's going on. Do we consider at that moment that this family has been broken up, right? That the children of who we just abducted aren't going to see their mom or dad again? Do we take that into consideration? When we dissect, we take this back to base camp and we throw this thing down and boom, we're cutting it open and we're looking at its organs and we're looking at how photographing it and doing all of these crazy tests, maybe even while this thing is alive, and the medical instruments that are coming down. Do we consider any of that? No, we don't. We don't. So, E.T. advanced from us. a million years, and they're looking at. Are they looking at us as intelligent species? Right? As they are approaching Earth, are they listening to our radio transmissions and trying to figure out our language? Maybe if they want to come here and look at us differently, they're doing that. And they come here prepared, and they've been flying across, light years of distance and time. And they're coming here totally prepared, and they want to communicate with us. Sure, absolutely, that happens. But what about the other side of it, where they're not concerned with any of that, and they're just cruising by, and they find a planet that's lit up and blue and beautiful. It's got life. Let's find out what kind of life is here. They look at us. Are they looking at us as their equal? Probably not. And so the abduction happens, right? They want to see what we're made of, what our carbon makeup is. Right? Our internal, it could be all of that. Our eyes, how, what's our brain structure? All of this testing that would happen. Are they concerned when they do that abduction about your family that's not going to see you come home on time with dinner? No. Now, is it twisted? Is that a sinister way of looking at all of this? We don't consider that, do we? We don't do it. It's a zone that we, quite frankly, don't go into. When you're a kid, and how easy is it to have this outlook on this? How easy is it to go into this zone? When you're a kid, and you're out, and you've got your bug jar, and you're out in a field capturing bees, and you get a big jar full of bees. Are you concerned? Do you? No. No, you're not. Butterflies? How about a bird? Right? Coming home with some kind of pet. You don't consider any of that, and it's got to be the same thing. There's no other way to look at it. And I don't want to get twisted with this or go too far out. It's just the only way to look at it. It is. And it's not cavalier. It's not juvenile. It's not basic. It's just the way that it is. And anytime I think about the ET phenomenon and the way that we are searching for life, or the way that we are doing things, or visiting other planets, we're an interplanetary species. We are. We've been to the moon. I don't know how many times we've been to Mars, but we've certainly, right now, you can go outside and look at Mars. Look at Mars. We've got stuff traveling there right now. And look how far away it is in its orbit, and we're in our orbit. How did we figure all of this out, that we are able to go there? Right? And I'm fascinated with that. We have stuff on the Martian planet right now. We've got rovers right now that we know about. This is the officials. Right now, we are interplanetary. So, what are we doing there? We're scooping up. We're grabbing. And if we found life on Mars right now, the official side of the life on Mars, we're going to bag and tag it. We're going to scoop it. We're going to have little robotic things that are spraying fluids on it and craziness, because that's what we're doing right now. So think about that. Let's go to the phones. I'm sorry to keep everybody on hold. Let's go to area code 814. You're up next on Fade to Black. Who's calling?
Hello?
Yes, you're live.
Oh, my God. It's me, Cynthia.
Hi, Cynthia. How are you? Where are you calling from?
Bradford, PA.
Bradford, Pennsylvania. How you doing?
Sir. Oh, been a day.
What's on your mind?
Been a day. Well, I was listening about your jar of bees.
And?
I don't know. Where does that come from? Jar of bees. And then you start going on and on and on with that. And I was like, a jar of bees. Okay, where is he going with that? So I was kind of confused, so elaborate.
Well, I just did, Cynthia, but I'll do it again when.
Yeah, I have not listened to you tonight, so I'm just coming in clear.
Okay.
You hear where I'm going with that?
Well,
okay.
I'll see what yeah, that was good, actually. I was talking about alien abductions and ET coming here and abducting people, right? Do you think they have a consciousness as they're doing that? Are they concerned? Do morals come into play where they're just plucking people and doing testing? Well, we do the same thing if we're going to the Brazilian rainforest and are looking for a new species of animal, right? And we just go and grab it and leave. Are we concerned about the family that we just broke up? You know what I mean? Are we,
oh my goodness.
Right?
I hear you. I hear you. But that's weird, don't you think?
How is that weird? Did you capture bees in a jar when you were a kid?
No.
You never did? Oh, come on.
Never did.
Cynthia.
Never did. No, never.
Why not?
I had cockroaches crawling everywhere.
Okay.
That's the difference. And they live forever. So think about that. So the difference between your bees and cockroaches, because I traveled all over the world, cockroaches live forever.
Right.
So now think about that.
Yeah, I think they live.
You can do nuclear. I'm Spanish, so my accent comes out. So you can do that nuclear thing that people talk about.
Uh-huh.
And what survives? Cockroaches.
Yep. Right. And we could learn a lot from that, too, if you think about it. I think cockroaches, don't they live about 100 years? It's 100 years. That's crazy.
They're creepy when they crawl on your curly hair like I have. And they crunch. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's kind of weird.
I got to say, I've experienced a lot in my life. I don't know if I've gone there. But
you don't want to go there because when I was in Panama, and I heard about you, that you lived in Panama, right?
I did.
I lived there for 3 years. I went to Balboa.
You went to Balboa High School? So did I.
Yeah.
What year were you there?
I was, I'm old. I'm 53. You're 54, right? Or 55?
Wait a minute. We went to Balboa High School at the same time?
Are you kidding me?
What?
I was in Balboa High in Panama Canal. My father was a banker, international auditor banker, and I lived there for 3 years. And I went there. Then I had to go to Colombia and then went back to Panama in the canal zone.
Right.
So I was there for the year. God, I can't remember.
You would have had to have been there 78, if you're the same age as me.
Yes, sir.
Well,
yes,
so
sir.
was I. I went there in 78, 79, and 1980.
But you're 54, right?
Yeah.
And I'm 53. I'll be turning 54 in February. So yes, you were there.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a trip.
Amazing.
Do you
and
remember?
The canal zone and Jesus Christ.
Who is your best friend?
Go ahead, talk.
Yeah, give me some names.
Names? No, I don't think so because you were military. My father's side was Bank of America. He was the vice president.
I'm talking about at the high school. Like, do you remember?
Oh, the high school? I forget it. I can't remember because I was cross-oving.
You don't remember
Colombia to Argentina and going back and forth because of my father's job.
You didn't have any friends at the school?
It was very hard to have friends when I was growing up. Yeah, very hard because I was there for 2 years. You make friends, you get in trouble, you party, blah, 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 and then you were going to another country.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
see, my father was an auditor for Bank of America internationally.
But see, this is what's weird, Cynthia. How could you have not known me at that high school? Everybody knew me.
I don't know.
I was the loudest.
I hated the school.
Oh, that was a great school. That was a great school.
For you, maybe, because I didn't have the time to spend the time there because I kept on getting pulled out.
What a drag. What a drag.
Yeah, it was hard.
I love Balboa.
For us.
I love Balboa High School. I loved every part about it. I loved every aspect. I liked the principal, the vice principal.
What was the school before that? Before you
Corundu. Corundu.
Yes. I was there mostly before I was there.
Yeah, Corundu Junior High. And
that's what it was.
It had the cafeteria that was a geodesic dome. You remember that?
Yes. That now we're talking, because I think when I went to high school in Balboa, I got pulled out twice. I didn't make friends there. So I was back in Colombia, and then they threw me back for a couple months in Balboa. So you understand where I'm going with that, right?
I do. And Cynthia, you know what the crazy part is? It's the end of the show. I got to run credits, and you're my last caller. Thank you so much.
I know.
And
I know.
You know, it's kind of crazy. You and I hung out, and you don't remember.
Ceviche.
And think
Remember
about
that.
it. Think about that. I'll talk to you, Cynthia.
All right.
Have a great
Ciao.
night. Went to high school with her. That's pretty trippy. That's kind of weird. Junior high, too. Got to thank Nick Redfern for coming in tonight. What a great conversation. The book is Top Secret Alien Abduction Files, What the Government Doesn't Want You to Know. Very simple. Go over to jimmychurchradio.com, click on the website. It's a great book. Seriously. Faded Black's executive producer is Rita Camarion. Show is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee, Dennis, and Bob. Announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Vito, and Mark D. Kovar. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy, spaceboymusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network, and syndication is KGRA, The Planet. This broadcast owned and copyrighted 2018 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tomorrow night, right here, open lines, Fader night, all night long. Until then, everybody be safe. Go Beckley Teppy.